we've got 150 originals that we now want to make sure are found and are out there for children to view on the Sky platforms. And we have originals coming through on Sky Kids for the next 2 years as well, because we've honoured all the agreements that were in place as well, including all the developments as well. But funding hasn't stopped. We are still commissioning news for children. We are still acquiring content for children. And we're also entering into a pre-buy deals. I don't know if you know what a pre-buy is, but the pre-buy deal is where we have a bit more editorial, but we perhaps put more money into that production at the start of its life, so we can then make sure that we help financing. So I know that there are other sessions that have perhaps said that Sky is closed for business, but unfortunately, that's not true. Fortunately, we are still investing in children at Sky in all of the areas that I've listed above.
When you made the decision to, when you said that you would stop commissioning new children's content, is there anything specific? You talked about finding and funding, but is there any specific thing that would have made a difference to that, would have changed that decision?
I think it's, as I say, it is those two main points. Discoverability is a very big issue. I want to make sure that children are seeing what we make, that's for sure. And I know that the viewing habits have changed significantly, but against these headwinds, Sky still is passionate about making sure that they become famous, the originals that we have made. So that's what we're doing going forwards, and that's my job now, is to make sure that children find our content as best as possible.
But given as you say, the viewing habits are changing, do you still think there is a demand for a linear channel dedicated to children's TV?
I think that it serves a purpose. I think if we see all of the platforms, for Sky specifically, I know that the linear channel is very, very useful for parents who have children that are at the younger end in the under 7 age category. You can put them, as a parent myself as well, I have a 7-year-old, when you put the channel on, it can be incredibly useful for you to be sort of doing things while that channel is on. And what's good about our channel is that everything on it is curated and has gone through a compliance team. So we have a very, very big group of passionate humans that are curating the content for the Sky video on demand and also the Sky linear channel. So I think it does have a place. Yes, I really do. And we do have viewers watching our great shows like Pip and Posy and Boost New, which is a really great show. And we also create programming to cater for different fan bases as well. So Boost New really helps neurodiverse children, and same with Ready Eddie Go as well. So the stuff that we do, the content that we make, all has a purpose, whether it's on linear or on video on demand.
As you mentioned Boost New, we went to visit them actually.
Yes,
we went to visit the McKinnon.
I'd heard that you've been to see that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, in January we went to Manchester. McKinnon and Saunders told us that Boost New has already been licensed for 94 different countries, so it's hugely successful. So that seems to be a real opportunity. So have you got a commitment to them going forward?
Yes, we are making, that's part of the 2-year plan actually for our originals. So we are making more Boost New. Boost New is still in production, and we are talking about doing more Boost New over the next 2 years as part of that original
commitment. And beyond
commitment.
the 2-year period, what happens then?
Well, when you're making kids TV, there's a certain limit to the volume that you make, because children are watching the same content over and over again. And Boost New hasn't waned in its popularity since the first series. So what you find is you make a series and then another series. There's an expectation to make more series, but you're looking back at the viewing on the first 2 series and it's still incredibly popular. So you have to make a decision when you're running a kids channel as to whether you're going to create more content or whether you're going to stop. And sometimes when you've got 100 to 400 episodes of something and it's still being watched and it's still popular, there is a decision to be made, and that's something that happens way before there are any certain issues in the industry. So I think there are decisions to be made at that level. From a Boost New point of view, it's incredibly popular, it is selling, there's more Boost New coming down the line over the next 2 years, and Sky is committed to making more Boost New.
So 2 more years of Boost New and then no more Boost New, no more Red Ball?
We haven't discussed 2 years' time.
Okay.
I can't say what the future for Boost New holds, but we're very proud of Boost New, and we really, really love making it, and it's a great team that make it.
Louise, can I move on to you? Before we get into the sort of granular detail of this, do you actually think that the current model of providing TV, children's TV in the UK is viable for the longer term?
Funding or finding, sorry?
Funding.
Funding. So obviously I'm here as a commissioner of preschool content, and I see these challenges every day of how to fund content. You've obviously heard from other sessions about sort of how challenged it is. It's very hard to sustain making content at the moment. So there's sort of some things that have been impacting that. First of all, there's a shift of the audience from traditional linear channels that we've seen. Advertising revenue has fallen, so it's fallen 12% in the last 4 years, and restrictions on food and drink advertising has added that additional pressure to commercial broadcasters. There's also rising production costs, so the cost of making high-end content that we do at Milkshake, it's really expensive. And so when you're trying to get funding, we work with a lot of co-productions. Obviously the tax credit it really matters in terms of the content that we're making, and then funds like the Young Audiences Content Fund was absolutely transformational for us.
We're going to come on to that in a minute.
For that, yes.
Yeah.
But I think sort of the pressure on trying to find the funding is real every day.
Do you survive without the co-producers?
No. So co-productions are crucial to everything that we do. We work with international partners. We're in a unique position at Paramount as well, because we have obviously the PSB for Channel 5, but also the wider Nickelodeon sort of global network. So we share content. So something like Peppa Pig is premiered on Milkshake and then secondary window on Nick, and so it allows us to sort of fund that content. So
you've got economies of scale in the sense that you've got the different platforms.
Absolutely, and I think the other thing is for content is if it's a non-franchise, the content doesn't get funded. So something like Peppa, it's a global show, it's sold in every country around the world. But if you've got a very UK specific show, like we're just about to launch a show called Move It Milkshakers with our presenters, it's a movement dance show, learning the alphabet, it's very UK specific. We don't fund that with a co-production partner, so you can't find that funding globally for those kind of UK specific shows.
That's where we need to move on to some of the financial support, which is Jeff.
Thanks, and morning. Louise, you mentioned the Young Audience Content Fund. I think both of you have called for some version of that to be reintroduced. I think you've also both called for some kind of tax reliefs. So of the two, which intervention is likely to have the most impact? Perhaps Louise first.
I think both. Sorry.
I was going to say both too.
So I think tax relief. It's firstly, thank you to the government for having sort of the tax credits. We absolutely welcome that, and we want that to continue. They really matter in the sort of finance plans that we have. So when we look at content and we're making that, you look at sort of the percentages of how much you've got for tax, how much you've got as your licence fee, etc. But also for the Young Audiences Content Fund, it was absolutely transformational for us. We made 13 shows, high-end content, regional content. We were working with first-time producers. We made a show with Fourth Wall in Liverpool called Milo. We made Pot Paper City with Love Love in Bournemouth. They were first-time producers. And the pilot that it was for 3 years was hugely successful. It funded 61 shows, 160 development projects, and what it enabled to do was it just accelerated production. We were able to get into production really quickly because the funding from the Young Audiences Content Fund was up to 50% of the budget. So we had a show called Mix Mups. That was one of the biggest awards. It was such an important show for us. It was a beautiful and stop frame animation made by McKinnon and Saunders. They make amazing content. And it was a show about disability representation, and we worked with a production team that had lived experience of disability representation as well. It was a regional show. We also made ultra access episodes as part of this show, which is the first time that you could watch content on a platform in a way that was suitable for the child. So it went beyond audio description, signing, and subtitling, so you could watch it with Makaton, with low clutter, so you choose, sort of how you wanted to watch it. And we had amazing feedback from the audience about it. One quote was, "Finally someone gets it. They've produced a show that is, for my child." And that was only possible with the Young Autism Content Fund. And just one more is, it made content that was previously unfeasible for us to make. So we made a drama, Mimi's World. It was set around sort of kids' emotions, how they dealt with friendships, really understanding their place in the world. So this really amazing content built around the early years foundation of, sort of all the content that we made. And we couldn't have made those shows without the Young Autism Content Fund.
Okay, me?
Yeah.
I think that the Youth Audiences Content Fund is a force for good. It's incredibly important. We also access the fund because we were able to show our news output on Sky News through the fund, and we were making the show anyway, but we were able to do spin-off shows using the Youth Audiences Content Fund, and I think it was solely responsible for growing our Sky News output at that time when it first came in. We're all very supportive, I think, of the Youth Audiences Content Fund. It's a way of increasing partnerships, it's a way of decreasing budgets for those partners, and it makes it a very viable opportunity for everybody concerned who's involved with it.
You both talked very glowingly about it. Of the two interventions, tax relief, would you say the YAC fund is more likely to stimulate production then?
Regarding the tax credit, I think the tax credit works well. But what I think with the tax credit is there are a lot of productions that face problems because you get the tax credit afterwards. So basically, you have to stump up and find the money to make the show. So that sort of process causes a lot of problems, especially if you're a small company. So I think that the tax incentive is great, but the problem is that lots of companies are sort of forced to find the money, and then they can claim the tax incentive afterwards. And that finance gap can cause a bit of a problem in the process, especially if you're a small company. So, but it is, both work hand in hand, I think. We definitely need both, I think.
And I'd agree, and I think, making high-end content, it's really expensive to make, quality content that's, thought through, working with educational consultants, animation, it's a long process as well. And so you need funding there in order to benefit from the tax credit as well. So they both work hand in hand. And we've seen that, a great example of this is in France. They have obviously a tax credit that's paid up front. It comes with content quotas. And so that drives this sort of commissioning. So you've got the supported cost, but also, the sort of commissioning strategy as well. And tax credits, they are really important for ensuring that you can make content, because it's part of the overall budget as well. But I think you need the fund as well. You need a pool of funding. So we also tap into other funds like Northern Ireland Screen or Northwest Screen. We made a show in Sunderland called Anisha's Outdoor Adventures, and we had Northwest Screen funding from that as well. And so those screen funds they're absolutely crucial for us to be able to fund the content in the first place, as well as the licence fee that we pay.
Yeah. So how would you fund it?
Well, I don't think it's for us to tell the sort of government how to fund things, but what I think we can say, I can say from Paramount, is that it really made a difference, and having the tax credit and having the fund really encouraged investment in the content. And I think working with sort of co-production partners, it would really invigorate production.
You're able to give us ideas on how to fund it if you like.
Well, I know that there have been other oral evidence sessions that have suggested there may be other government departments that can come together, perhaps, or the National Lottery. Or I know that's been mentioned in other oral evidence sessions. But it's up to the decision to be made. But we would very much welcome it, that's for sure.
Okay, and finally from me, just on the idea the BBC have put forward about an enhanced tax relief for UK culturally relevant content. What's your view on that?
Yes, I think we need that's more in the public service broadcasting world that I probably can't really comment on. I don't know about you.
I think for tax credits there's a cultural test that you have to have for it to sort of apply, but I think sort of any tax credit is really beneficial to productions, and sort of to have that to continue is really important for kids television, to ensure that we can continue to make this like really high end nourishing content for the audience, and so I think I would agree.
Okay.
I just very gently encourage you to get off of the fence, both of you. Because Jeff asked you a very simple question: which intervention would be most likely to have the most impact? So in a sense, rather than sort of like going around the houses and talking at us for a really, really long time, can we just have a one-sentence answer? Which intervention, in your mind, is likely to have the most impact quickest?
Fund.
The fund.
Fund. Okay, good. Thank you. That's really good. Just, maybe it's me, but I sort of drifted off.
They do go hand in hand, though.
I drifted off there for a second, and it just felt like we were waffling a little bit. Thank you. Let's move on to Annalise, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming in. I'm going to ask some questions around commissioning. So I'm going to ask to you first, Louise. What is the balance of programmes on Milkshake that you commission compared to acquisitions?
So we spend 85% of our budget on UK originations, and about 10% on acquisitions. And the rest is sort of for continuity. So we have an amazing studio with our presenters. So we have continuity, and we also make in-house short form. So that's the sort of balance in terms of the spend. So we absolutely prioritise UK originations for our content output on Milkshake. So things like Peppa Pig, Ben and Holly, Stan and Gran, which is sort of a show that we launched last year in animation that showcases Stan and his Gran having sort of adventures, learning about nature, based in a sort of coastal town that looks like the UK. Pip and Posy, that we sort of did a co-production with Sky. Mix Muts, which I talked about. We
saw Mix Muts at the studio when we visited.
Oh, amazing! Yeah, it was such an amazing show. We learnt so much about how to make really good, inclusive content that represented sort of disabled community, and we had so much feedback from the audience that it really mattered to them as well.
And when you do commission children's programming, what proportion is it that you are putting into the financing of that?
We look at sort of the overall budget, so it can vary. It depends on sort of the overall budget and also the type of show, episodes and the duration. So we make short programmes, 5, 7 and 11 minutes long, of animation for live action. We make a lot of fact-end shows as well, so things like Ruan Harper's Wonderworld from Doc Harts, which was a show about kids going on play dates but learning about cultures from around the world. And that financing is slightly different to an animation because we look at co-production partners. So it can vary. So, sort of it might be 70% of the budget for some of the live action shows. It could be 10% for animations, depending on the type of animation that it is, whether there are sort of global partners or multiple partners. So we work with lots of other broadcasters. So, for example, on Stan and Gran, which I mentioned, we had a lot of sort of partners on that. So S4C in Wales, RTE in Ireland, ABC in Australia, NRK in Norway, but also that budget was put together with investment from production partners such as Zodiac, Tiger Aspect, Zentric. So you look at sort of, when you're looking at that sort of financing plan of how you put the co-production together or any budget together, you then see sort of what other partners you've got as well.
And is that like you will take an equal piece of the pie, or does it vary? It
varies. So it depends on the rights. So we will, from Milkshake, we will take the rights in the UK and Ireland, but we also are open to sharing and sort of having flexible rights to make budgets work. So we're sort of doing a show at the moment where we're working with RTE, and we're looking at equal rights in both territories as well. So it really depends on the sort of rights that you have.
To interrupt, sorry, with Pip and Posy, we've worked really well together It's been a really great relationship, and we've been able to work out the rights and work out the transmission times and who's going to have which episode when, and we've been working really well with Pip and Posy, and that's a really top show for Sky and for well, I won't say it's your top show, I don't know, but
it's one of our top shows,
it's definitely one of our top shows, that's for sure. But that's worked out really well, and I think that partnerships are really important going forwards as well. So when we're commissioning, you know, if the more partners that are involved, and I just know that you have two broadcasters that have worked together on a show here, and that's fantastic, and that's quite rare, I think, sometimes, especially in the UK. We've really enjoyed making Pip and Posy, and that's worked really well for Sky. So I just sort of wanted to make that point really as well, that working together can happen, and we can get together and work across channels and broadcasting as well.
You've both talked about the economic pressures and how that works out, but how does that make the children's TV affected? How does that affect what kind of content you do commission? And you've touched on that with the partnerships as well, and I presume that the main driver of that is these economic factors and pressures.
Budgets are getting more expensive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And because of that, then you have to make certain decisions. That's why we talked about the YACF and the tax credit, because we talk about both of them all the time when the YACF existed, because they both worked hand in hand, because they helped your budget. And obviously things are more expensive to make now as well. So because the budgets are expensive, then you find that you're making editorial choices and decisions to make things less premium. And that affects things totally. So you want to make sure that you make a great show. But the budgets do restrict you sometimes, and that can affect the commissioning decision that you make.
Give an example of a show that cost very little and has been like a huge success.
Well, I don't think it would be fair to mention budgets now, but we're more than happy to make supplementary evidence afterwards, I think, if that helps the inquiry, definitely. But there are plenty of those shows, and there are shows that do perform incredibly well. But when you link those to the budgets, that'd probably be...
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So what blend of content that you make would you describe, and Louise, you touched on this before, UK culturally relevant?
Yeah, so we do animation and live action. So animation is, sort of really key for the sort of preschool audience that we serve on Milkshake. So we have shows, as I mentioned, Peppa Pig. It's over 20 years old, and for us to be able to, continue to sort of invest in that, that's, our sort of ecosystem across Paramount really is important. We're able to, share the budgets with Nick Jr. as well, and also, sort of Paramount Plus. But we also have, sort of acquisitions like Thomas, the Tank Engine, Fireman Sam. We did a co-production with Nick Jr. last year, the first one we've ever done globally, Tim Rex in Space, about dinosaurs in space, what's not to love? And that's been hugely successful, but it's really expensive. And so, sort of having those partners is really important. But then we obviously have live action content. We're really committed to that on Milkshake. So we have a wonderful show, and you say sort of relatively low cost compared to sort of animation, is a show called Animal Care Club that we make with Daisy Beck, and it's about kids' love of animals. We know they love animals, and sort of how they can look after them, and sort of understand different sort of animals that they have, because we base everything around the Early Years Foundation. So whether that is about learning about the world or about themselves, or whether it's about literacy or counting, we try to balance the content that we have, because it's really important for kids to be represented on screen. They want to see sort of versions of themselves, especially also regional content. As I say, 60% of our content is regional, made with producers from across the UK. At the moment, our productions, we have about 500 jobs as a result of our productions that are in the UK, and that's really, really important. And so we look at the balance. We obviously, as commissioner, I look at sort of what fits within our sort of DNA and our portfolio, and so we try to sort of have that mix of shows that are both animated stories, sort of content that is really important to us. Sometimes the slower paced content like Tweedy and Fluff, that was supported by the Audience Content Fund. It was the first stop frame animation that was made in Birmingham, a first-time producer. It's such a beautiful show. It's much slower. It's 5 minutes, and it's about love and nurture and understanding how you build friendships. So we look at the type of content that we want and also think about the age and stage of that content as well, because that's very important, because a 2 and 3 year old is very, very different to a 5 and 6 year old. So we have to think about that content and how we make it for the different audience as well. So we try to balance the sort of live action and also the animation as well.
And just finally from me, with Milkshake, you have got a no diversity, no commission policy. Can you just go into a bit of what?
It's absolutely fundamental to everything we do. So we think about sort of how we can be representative of kids, socio-economic, across the UK, to ensure that it's not only for the stories that you see on screen, so whether that is a storyline about a particular culture that we had in Ruan Harper, it's also about the production team as well. It can also mean about the writers that we have on the shows. They're super critical for sort of how we make productions, and we try to encourage new writers within sort of animations, and so the no diversity, no commission policy is absolutely fundamental to everything that we do, and we really sort of drill down on that with every commission that we do.
It runs like right through.
It runs all the way through. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Annelies. I mean, the picture you paint of having to do some really quite complicated co-production deals in order to bring some of these really important shows to fruition reflects quite a lot of what we've heard in our evidence. For example, when we went to McKinnon and Saunders, they spoke about how although obviously the BBC and Channel 5 are really significant commissioners, the amount that you can afford to put in means that you have to kind of build quite a complicated patchwork of other funders, which significantly dilutes the IP ownership in exchange for the investment. Does that concern you?
So for the rights that we take, the producer retains the overall IP ownership of that. So we license the content for a period of years. So it's usually 5 years for us on Milkshake. And so we look at sort of what we want when we make PSB content is we want it to be seen. And so obviously we have it for the different platforms that we have. That would be sort of on our linear service, on the 5 streaming service as well, on Paramount Plus, and with affiliate partners like Sky and Virgin as well. And it is difficult that to get that funding. As I said, content is expensive, and so we have to have those multiple partners on shows in order for them to get made. It's the only way that we can do it. And no one's financing, fully financing kids' content, and so you have to work with partners. So there is an element that yes, there is different rights that the producer will obviously negotiate in terms of sort of globally who they're working with, but obviously with whether it's us in the UK.
Thank you. Natasha, please.
I used to, after declaring interest, I used to work at Channel 4 before becoming an MP, and I have 2 small children who have watched a lot of Milkshake, so thank you so much for your service. It's a really lovely thing. So I'm going to ask some questions around YouTube and video sharing platforms, but also things around prominence and what that means for you. So what are your motivations for putting your content onto YouTube? I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So we use YouTube as a promotional platform, a marketing platform. We put short form content on there. We put some full episodes. Most of our viewing is on live and sort of scheduled television, but also on VOD. It's just not commercially viable for commercial broadcasters or I think independent producers to put first run content on YouTube at the moment. As I said, it's very expensive. The economics just don't work for us. YouTube take a percentage of that ad revenue. And PSB content is not surfaced, it's not prominent, and so it's more reliable for us to have an audience that's on linear and streaming, and YouTube just are not obligated to provide that support to PSB content, both financially and monetization is weak for us. If it wasn't, we'd be on that platform. It just doesn't work for us. And in terms of the sort of algorithm surfaces the content, it just doesn't prioritize PSB quality content.
To be brief, I agree. So basically, from a Sky Kids point of view, quickly, we did the same thing. We have a Sky Kids YouTube channel with a very small amount of subscribers. We put some episodes up there, some full episodes, outside of our subscriber zone, and that's largely because they're shows that serve certain fan bases that we really want them to see it, like Ready, Eddie, Go, which is a wonderful show about Eddie, who is autistic, and we felt that having those shows outside of the paywall would be really crucial for that audience, and it has gone down well. Same with Boost News. We put some Boost News up there as well. But I agree with what Louise said. That's the same for us too with YouTube.
So it's not economically viable to be using YouTube.
No, we haven't
more than a
really.
marketing tool.
We don't really have a relationship, really, if I'm honest, for Sky Kids content with YouTube. We have a video on demand service and a linear channel that we do at Sky, and that works well for us at the moment. But I think that we know that audiences are migrating, of course, to YouTube, but there's naturally the concern that if you put something on YouTube, will they find it? And again, it goes back to finding and funding, and that's the issue, is that there's no guarantee, even as a broadcaster, if you put your content on YouTube, that they will find it. And of course, after they've watched the great content on there, what then do they see on the onward journeys? And that's, as a parent, I'm concerned about that. So if you have great content on YouTube, what happens afterwards? And that's something that we all discuss.
And so Ian, so just to pick up on a couple of your points, you in your written evidence to us, you said that Sky asked that any new prominence regime covers public service content more broadly rather than only content from PSBs. Sky's behind a paywall. Why would the government push for that?
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat the question
So
again?
in the written evidence that came in, Sky sort of pushed for prominence, any new prominence regime coming through the Media Act or anything like that, should cover public service content more broadly rather than just PSBs. But Sky is, behind a paywall, so why would we sort of put legislation to protect your income?
Yeah, I think we've said that just purely because we think that content is the most important thing, and that's the decision that should be made when it comes to prominence, not the actual the platform or the provider. So when it comes to children, I think content's massively important, and that should have the prominence. So it's actually based on the content rather than the provider itself. That's all we were saying in that.
And I suppose just a bit more a broader point around video sharing platforms. And you both sort of picked up on this. I mean, you've both spoken passionately about the importance of high quality content, about what goes into making the programs that you make, about keeping. I think on a pack kind of described Milkshake as a safe space for parents and children on the linear schedule. So, do you think that video sharing platforms are safe for children?
I think for the content that we put up there, we obviously have all of our content goes through a broadcast compliance process. So that applies for all of our content on any of our platforms. Safety for children and also the trust of the parents and carers is absolutely fundamental to everything that we do. And so the content that we put up onto YouTube, we curate that. We think about how it's placed. We have obviously content that is created by expert producers. They think about the story structure, they think about the sort of educational content that is being made, and we also follow all of the codes, so made for kids on YouTube. So sort of there's no personalised ads, you can't add comments. We follow all of those sort of regulations to ensure that our content on that platform is safe.
So did you say that because obviously they've just had quite a high profile legal case where they've been found to created a platform that is intentionally addictive to young people. Are you comfortable with your content being on a platform that is intentionally addictive?
On YouTube. Oh, we just have promotional clips. There's not the. I don't think that. I couldn't possibly comment about that really. I feel that when it comes to putting your content on YouTube, we do it very few and far between. Yeah. We're not out to put lots of content on and drive it as a business. But I don't feel that from our very small Sky Kids YouTube channel that it would be addictive. in that way.
I guess your content isn't, but the platform that you put it on perhaps has been found to be so. So you know in your walled garden of Sky Kids on Sky, your Sky platforms, I'm sure has been created to the best highest possible standards. But whether you're using it as a marketing tool or not, the content is on a platform that has been found to be intentionally addictive. Is it maybe time for broadcasters and PSBs to think again about how we use these platforms?
We wait to see the outcome of the decision, further decisions, of course.
And I think for us is the paramount. We, as I've talked about earlier, you know, so the safety controls that we have are really important. YouTube is not our main platform. It's a marketing and promotional tool for us. We focus on our linear and streaming platform where we do have those, sort of safety measures. We've got age ratings, we have descriptors, we have a kids mode so that you know where when you're going into that sort of platform, it's all kids content, it's curated. You can click through to it from the homepage to get into that platform. We use YouTube for the same as I think for Sky, you know, sort of as promotional platform. I can't really speak about the wider YouTube content that's made because we don't make that content. We make sort of good quality content. We place clips on our YouTube platform to sort of be where the kids are.
Yeah, I think as well, very, very similar to Louise, for our streaming and for our VOD service as well, we have various, you know, safety rules in place. My job, I work in VOD and linear channels, and I'm quite proud of working in that space. I think it's curated really well. We're a very passionate team, even the compliance team. You know, there's a team who they watch everything on Sky, but they really love watching the kids' shows. And one of the things that makes it safe for us is that we made a decision not to run adverts on the linear channel because we spoke to loads of parents and they didn't want adverts. So even as a commercial broadcaster, we made that decision because we felt it was right for our viewers. And that's something that we stand by. And that's another reason why we feel that our linear service is safe for children and our VOD service.
No, and just finally though, I guess the point I'm making is that you're right, where you can control things. Like I said, you're producing these things to the highest possible safety standards, but you're sort of being encouraged to put more content onto a place that you don't control, that has been found to be intentionally been designed to be intentionally addictive. So do you think there's any more further legislation that government should be looking at to regulate this space in a similar way that you're regulated, in making sure that, you know, young
we want it safe, don't we? We want everything to be safe for children, and that's whether, no matter where we work, if we're parents, we want children to be safe. So absolutely, of course, I want my children to be able to go on somewhere and it's safe, and I know that there's been rules in place to make it safe. You know, it's as simple as that. So the more that happens, it can only be a better place for children.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. You mentioned, you mentioned that you use YouTube sparingly. You don't use it a lot, but you use it. So why is that? Why do you use it sparingly?
My job and our team are focused on the VOD platform and the linear channel. You know, we've thought about YouTube. We know that they're on YouTube, but we have concerns. You know, there are concerns, and maybe I'm hesitant about that. I don't know, but I feel at the moment that, you know, we are in discussions on how we can grow YouTube. We don't talk to YouTube about our channel. They sometimes advise us on things that are happening on YouTube for events that we might want to put content up that might promote certain things that they have on their calendar. But my job is mainly to look after video on demand and linear and really make that the best experience for children in a safe space.
If I may, what would those concerns be?
Oh, just what I've said earlier about onward journeys, making sure that children on third-party platforms have a safe journey and see amazing content, and perhaps make sure they don't see stuff they shouldn't see.
I think also, to answer your question, is we put content on YouTube because 40% of kids viewing is going to YouTube. We want our content to be seen. This is nourishing, fantastic content that's made for British children, and we want that prominence. We want content to be seen, so we have a certain selected amount of sort of content on there, but really we are trying to ensure that the viewing is on our own curated, safe platforms. our linear service, our streaming platform as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Ewan, I think it was you particularly that said we want children to be safe. Right? I mean, we all do. Both of your organisations have safeguards to make sure that the content you create is suitable for children. Do you think that YouTube, at large, the other content creators that post their material to YouTube, do they all feel the same way? Do they have those safeguards?
I can't comment on YouTube really. I'm here to talk about, from a Sky Kids perspective and what I do in my job day to day for the linear channel and VOD service. But we want children to be safe, that's for sure. But I can't comment about that, I'm afraid.
The safeguards that you've got in place, though, they're there for a reason, right?
They are absolutely there for a reason for our service.
Across the board.
I think that safety for children is important, so we shouldn't be discussing otherwise, should we? We should always be discussing that wherever a child goes online, it should be safe. Yeah.
And I think sort of the content that creators make is slightly different to sort of the content that we make that's a sort of commission. Some of it is, it's short, it's quicker. We look at, sort of slower paced content that's got a repetition, got a story structure, that, sort of has a purpose as well. I'm not saying content creators don't have that. There's some amazing content on YouTube from certain creators, but I can't really comment on the whole sort of ecosystem of YouTube because focused on sort of what we make for YouTube. But I agree with Ian that we do want our platforms to be safe. That's why at Paramount we have all our safety measures in place. We really want to make sure that when children are on our platforms, parents and carers feel safe. They know it's curated and that they can watch it in a sort of an area that is good.
There's a problem here, isn't there? You guys are investing in a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of care and a lot of passion into producing content which is well thought out, educationally sound and appropriate for young audiences. And yet at the same time you're sharing it in some cases on YouTube where we know that it has no particular prominence over and above the AI generated slop that might be there, which doesn't do anything for the education or the mind. So we need to rationalise this. You said it's because that's where the kids' eyes are, and that's where the eyeballs are. So that's where the audience is. That's where you have to go. So how do we tackle this? How, what's the key to ensuring that high quality content that you put so much time and effort and care into making is what our children see predominantly when they go onto YouTube Kids, for example?
I think it's prominence. It's making sure that the algorithm surfaces that content. We want that content to be found, and at the moment it isn't. That's why.
How you said prominence? Yes, I mean it's very easy to say that as a word, as if it encompasses. But how should the government ensure that YouTube give prominence to high quality content like the stuff that you commission?
I suppose it could be in the same way of how we make our content. We have a broadcast compliance code. We follow that as Ian says. Shout out to the compliance teams because they are absolutely amazing into what they do every single day. They watch everything and they make sure that it follows sort of all of the safety measures for kids content and how it's produced, how it's edited together, the tone, the pace, everything, as well as sort of editorial that we have. So that could be something that is sort of adopted for content that's on YouTube.
YouTube should be regarded as a broadcaster.
It's a bit different it's a video sharing platform. Obviously it has content on there. YouTube doesn't fund content. It's not like a broadcaster, so it's slightly different.
There isn't any legislation out there to govern distribution platforms. There's legislation out there for broadcasters and there's legislation out there for social media companies. They deny that they're either. They talk about themselves being a distribution platform, as you say. So on the basis that there is no specific legislation geared towards them and what they do, should they be legislated for as both?
I suppose, it's something for the government to look at, but, it could be something that is reviewed too, because as going back to what sort of both of us have said, content needs to be nourishing, good content for kids, but it also needs to be safe on those platforms. And we're very happy to sort of discuss with YouTube, sort of the measures that we use. There's obviously the Made for Kids, the COPPA rules in place at the moment, and we follow all of those guidelines. We, ensure that our content is sort of compliant content and follows all of that editorial process.
Yes,
that's
but
on that
we know all
platform.
this, but then you plop it onto YouTube where it's in the kind of wild west of content. You don't know what's going to be popping up next to it. So what I want to know is how should they be regulated to ensure that the eyeballs that are drawn to it are once they've seen your high quality content, then see something else which is equally high quantity.
If you don't mind me interrupting, basically, when we put content on YouTube, we're aware of personalisation and YouTube Kids, which has certain safeguards in place, and that's obviously something that YouTube has done. Because obviously it's got to be a balanced view. I know I'm not being on the fence hopefully, but I'm sort of as a sort of a balanced view here, because I think that they do have things in place that do protect children as well, of course, and we've heard that in other evidence sessions. And we don't put content up against slop. I think that we do think about what we put up there, and we're assuming that it goes on YouTube Kids, which is for children only, and
So you're aware your content is on the non-logged in bit as well. So if you go on to just the website, which is next to slop and next to whatever it may well be, it's also there. I think that the point we're trying to make, I feel, is that broadcasters are jumping through hoops and doing the right thing when it comes to kids' content, but being asked to put it onto a platform that isn't doing the same thing.
Yes.
So you're kind of fighting an unfair battle.
Of course, and in answer to your question,
how do we help?
Of course, all I know is that there can be learnings from our processes, because we take it to our heart and we know exactly what we do with our output, and we know that we care for it, we comply it, we check it, it's safe. We have PIN numbers on our VOD services to make sure that children can't go away from Sky Kids and see other things on television, let alone on a VOD service. All of these things are required by us because we want to make sure that children are safe. We agree that there should be something in place to make sure we are all on the same playing field.
Good, thank you.
Come back in. And where were we? You mentioned your concerns earlier, Ian. Is one of those concerns perhaps that you put your content up, you put it up in good faith, it's safe content, but that children that might then go to YouTube for your content might then be exposed to this slop and to more damaging content?
I can only comment today on my job at Sky Kids and what we do at Sky Kids to make it safe for children. There is a concern, obviously, that might happen, of course, but at the moment, this is, my evidence is based on my role at Sky Kids and our VOD service and linear television.
What's the best way to ensure that that doesn't happen?
On YouTube?
That they're not exposed to more damaging material on whatever platform? I
don't understand the inner workings of the YouTube platform, I'm afraid. So that's probably best the question for them.
Any thoughts on that, Louise?
I think, sort of adopting some of the safety measures that we have, so that could be something that could be reviewed, sort of age ratings. I think, sort of in a previous session, I was talking about like kite marks as well, sort of whether that content is, sort of a certain quality. How you do that would have to be looked into. I haven't got the answer for that. But I think certainly looking at how, as broadcasters, we adopt those safety measures, not only from the content that's made from an editorial point of view, but then how it's presented on that platform as well, whether it's, sort of within those safe, curated, trusted spaces for children, and, so families can sort of understand. I'm afraid I can't also comment too much about sort of the sort of algorithm and how YouTube works, because we focus on our sort of broadcast platforms, but we could get, sort of our policy team to sort of review that and send some details to you.
That would be helpful. Thank you for the content that you do create, by the way. My daughter also watches Milkshake, and I grew up with Nickelodeon.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Let's move back to Bio, please.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, both of you. So my question is to yourself, Ian. What motivated Sky to produce this FYI news service?
Yes, well, it's absolutely amazing, and I feel very proud to have worked on our Sky News service for 7 years now. It's what motivates us is the fact that we give children a voice in our news output, and we work very closely with Fresh Start Media, who are an amazing production company. They are fantastic journalists, and they work with children so well. And we feel that it's incredibly important for children to have a voice. We funded a daily bulletin that runs every day, and that goes on the Children United website, which is a new global website that's safe news for kids that Nikki Cox has set up. So we funded a daily bulletin where you get 2 minutes of the day's news presented by children. And we've also carried on commissioning the Investigate series, which was the BAFTA winner last year for non-scripted. And we've discovered last week, I think it was, that we've also been nominated this year for a BAFTA as well for it. So we can't quite believe it. We're so happy that it's been recognised in these different sort of award ceremonies. We're just like, wow, we can't believe it. But we've actually got some great topics as well. We focus on really big topics that kids want to talk about. So the episode that's nominated is called World War Me. And we focused on lots of children in different war zones, talking about the wars that they're growing up in, because we know that children should not be in war. And we're working on a new film at the moment, which is looking at girls in sport and why girls drop out of sport, which we're in the edit with at the moment, and that will be a new film that's released soon. But I think because of all of those, we're so proud of the fact that it reaches, I think at the last count we've had 5 million views on with our Children United bulletin and the films, which is fantastic. Sky News also collaborates with them on their platform as well. And Sky News shows the linear version of the films that we make as well, which is fantastic. And it's really good to have that support from Sky News, because even when it's children's news, safe for children if a tax incentive was used in that genre. I think it would make sense, and I think it would make more people think about the safety of news if it was more economical to make it. So I think that it does help. It does help funding news, even though we are funding news and we are commissioning news. Anything that with a tax incentive can help create more safe news and more people can create that content.
Okay. And my last question, given Sky's sort of retreat from original children's commissions, what kind of ring fence protections will there be for FYI? So to ensure that that's not next on the chopping block.
Yes, we don't have a chopping block. I think that basically news. We don't have a chopping block. I think news is quite important to us, especially with our partnership with Sky News, and we are making more films. It's in commission. So.
Thank you.
I have no chopping block. David.
Rude, wasn't it? Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Thank you, Carla. Ian, you've referred a number of times to changing viewing habits of children, but without being explicit about what those changing habits are. Last session of this committee we had YouTube. Today, shortly, we're going to have TikTok and Instagram. FYI was a award-winning 15-minute television slot which used to play multiple times at the weekend. In a sense, it complemented the BBC Newsround, a school day kind of thing. Gets shown in schools. It seems most primary schools in the country now show Newsround. Yours was on at the weekend. And then you had FYI Investigates, another award-winning segment. If you had the two of them back-to-back, you had a 30-minute segment on the television. As I understand it, the strategy now is you now default to 90-second episodes. You still have the 15 minutes, but the emphasis is all on the 90-second episodes.
It's sort of
FYI 90. Just can you talk us through what the kind of boardroom conversation was around that and how you personally feel about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it all started with our presenters telling us that we were doing a long show that children that wouldn't watch it. It was our presenters. Our presenters were who are young children, children presenters. They started saying that you need to make it shorter because kids won't watch a longer magazine news show. So we were at that point. We were at a turning point anyway with how we can make it more snackable news for children. So Nikki Cox was also setting up Children United as well, which we've been discussing with her about that. So we thought if we made a bulletin, it would be more snackable and takeaway content that you can talk about with your mates because it's quicker. And also, we do know that they're used to viewing shorter content now. We do make the longer.
What
films.
do you think about that? Come on. Tell us what you think. Is this a good thing? News now comes in a 90-second package.
I think
is that a good thing? And by the way, you said a moment ago you don't think you have content on TikTok and Instagram. Are you sure? Because that 90-second news snack sounds a lot like it's made for TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah, Sky News does.
Yeah.
And Sky News,
but including FYI 90.
It's not on TikTok. It's not on TikTok. It's on YouTube. It's shared on.
You say it's not on Instagram. It's not on TikTok.
It's on Instagram, which I said earlier, and it's on YouTube. It's not on TikTok.
You're sure?
Absolutely sure.
Okay. And how do you feel about this change in the way the news
I think that the 90 seconds is good. If children are saying that they have it in shorter bursts, and it gives an encouragement conversation for children to talk about news, and I know that everything in that bulletin is safe, and I know that they want to talk about snackable news, then that's a good thing. And also, just to point out, we do make longer documentaries. They haven't gone anywhere. They're still on Sky News, and they are being watched and loved by teachers and by audiences.
Do you think it's good for? I mean, I know I'm tempting you into areas. You're a TV guy. You're not a doctor.
I'm a TV guy.
I realise that. But just from your, and actually I'll ask you both. In your professional judgment, you spend a lot of time thinking about children and what children watch, what they consume. You both, I think, have used the word enriched. How you enrich children's lives. Do you think for our society it's a good development that you move from a 15-minute FYI or an 8-minute news round to a 90-second bite news?
FYI, FYI was once every week, and it was 15 minutes. They weren't watching it. It's as simple as that. Now we have every day, and there's
no, I
news
appreciate
every.
why.
I know that.
I get you, and not just about your program.
I'm saying I agree with the 90-second bulletin.
This is about the change, I guess, overall. It's about a change, and maybe it's a misty-eyed, look back at a world that was, is long gone, and we can't do anything to bring it back. But I think it's not a bad thing to say whether we think it's the change, even if it's irreversible, is a good thing or a bad thing, and not just on news, but like in general, the move to shorter content and all sorts of things, and the binging of that content quite often rather than a varied diet, and move from channels to self-selection. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think what we're showing here is that there are certain genres that work well with shorter content. News is that. When it comes to animation, they usually run at 7 minutes or 11 minutes. That works well too. And when you've got a live action drama, 22 minutes. I think that we've always worked, and that is the misty-eyed days, and it's still with us. So we don't have to worry. It's still with us, those durations. But when it comes to news, 90 seconds is, I think, it's working well daily.
And Louise, you run channels.
Yeah.
Give us a good defence of channels.
So I think it depends how you make that content. So for shorter content, we have songs on every day in the studio with our presenters. They're about 30 seconds, can be a minute, nursery rhymes. And so I think it's what Ian says. It depends on the type of content that it is. We do crafts.
But you have a product that presents a curated set of content, some variety and some balance. Do you think there's a benefit to that compared to a totally kind of self-selection world?
Say the question again. Sorry, I didn't quite understand.
Is a channels worth having? Are they worth defending in a world where you can do video on demand, and even if it is a parent with a child under 7, the parent could set the controls in advance. Is it worth defending the concept of a channel?
Yes.
And how are you doing that?
Yes, I think it is, because we, for 25 years we've had Milkshake. It's been the morning breakfast solution for families. It's that routine. Routine is so important to parents, and particularly for, for us, for preschool children that may be under, 6 and 5 years old. The routine is absolutely crucial. And I think when talking about the sort of durations, we have like 5, 11s and 7s, but we also do short form as well, and that can be 2.5 minutes. So it can be, it depends what it's about. We've done, sort of shorts on transport or science. And so it's ensuring that learning is, we work with educational consultants, and I think the session that was with the academics, it was really interesting to see and fascinating some of the things that they said. I sent that transcript around to my whole team and said, read this, it affirms everything that we do. We think about the duration, we think about how it's created, where the repetition is. So it really depends on the duration. But our channel's worth defending, yes, because I think it's it's that regular viewing that you can have within your day for children. For us on Milkshake, it's in the morning.
And just to add, teachers were saying to us they wanted shorter news for their classroom sessions. They were saying that to us.
I think that's a really good point. Our content is used in sort of schools and preschools as well. I've sent it to my daughter's school actually when they were learning about. We do cultural shorts. It's Vasaki today, and we've got a short about that. And so I sent it to her school, and they're like, "Oh, great, we can watch this." We had some amazing shorts that we did for Black History Month, where we celebrated Carnival. And again, I sent that to sort of some of my NCT groups, some of my mum's groups, to say, this is great content that you can watch. So sometimes that short content can be as good and educational as the sort of longer form content that is created around a story where you've got characters.
Quick one.
Thanks, Chair. Ian, you were adamant at pains to state that your material was on Instagram but was not on TikTok. TikTok's one of the largest social media platforms in the world. What decision was made not to publish to TikTok, and why?
I think that we'd seen that when we were using Instagram and YouTube, there was more engagement.
Thank you.
Well, did you try TikTok, or you?
No, we did. We didn't try TikTok. We just were really happy with the engagement that we'd got with the ones that we'd chosen.
They're not more engagement because you didn't try the other one.
Yeah, it's sort of correct actually. Yes, that's the right thing. We're trying one thing, then we tried another. We were really happy with the engagement, and we felt that it was it was the right thing to do at that time.
Earlier in one of the answers to our questions, you said that you had to go where the eyeballs are, and the eyeballs are on TikTok. So why aren't you there?
Not for the age group that we're targeting, I hope.
And is it that? Is it that they well, I mean...
What if we were to tell you if that's not the case?
I know that.
Yeah.
I do know that. That's why I said I hope with a tongue in cheek. But I hope that we will not put our news service there.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, you'll be delighted to know that you are now on our chopping block because we've come to the end of our session. Is there anything before we let you leave? Is there anything that you wanted to add to us?
I think firstly, thank you to the committee for looking into this. Children's content is so important for 20% of the population, and if we want that content to continue to be sort of fantastic, nourishing, educational, as well as entertaining content, as we've talked about, I think sort of looking at tax relief is so important for funding. Re-establishing a fund is something that we would urge the government to look at. Kids want to see themselves reflected on screen. They want those stories. We all remember the shows that we watched as children. Like Paddington was one of mine, and I was delighted when I was able to work on sort of Paddington at Nick Jr. as well. You really remember that, and kids get inspired by that content. So I'd just say thank you for sort of all of the work that you're doing to look at this.
And also just to say that we are in these roles now, but Louise and I are celebrating 27 years this year of making children's TV. We started off at Children's ITV back in when was it? Back in 1997. I was a Blue Peter runner at one point, and we've been making children's content our whole lives. Yeah. And this is an incredibly important session today. And to be here with you all is like blows my mind. But also to have been here and sat here with our peers like Greg and Maddie and other people and Jackie that have been here too. That's a real honour. So thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you very much for joining us today. We're now going to take a very short break, and then after that we will be inviting in TikTok and Meta. So thank you very much today.
Thank you.
Thanks for your questions.
Our second panel this morning, we're now going to hear from those responsible for TikTok and Instagram, and we're joined by Giles Darrington, who is Senior Government Relations and Public Policy Manager for TikTok, and Rebecca Stimpson, who is the UK Director of Public Policy for Meta. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I'm going to kick off the questions. Now, I don't know if you had the opportunity to watch a previous session that we did with YouTube, but we had a discussion about how we define them. They were adamant that they weren't a broadcaster or a social media company. They are a distribution platform. I wondered how you would define yourselves. Giles, can you kick us off?
Sure, and thanks so much for the committee for having us today, and indeed for the clerks for being flexible and patient with us as we organise the session. TikTok ultimately is an entertainment platform, global entertainment platform with over 1 billion users. What that means is that our content is primarily driven by user-to-user content. So that is users generating great ideas, creating things and putting them out into the world, and then other users looking at them. What that means in regulatory terms is that we are a user-to-user service, which is prescribed under the Online Safety Act and regulated by Ofcom in that way. It's worth saying that TikTok's about an 8-year-old company. Prior to the Online Safety Act, we were regulated directly as a VSP, video sharing platform, under the kind of the former EU regulations. So we've consistently seen ourselves in that space. We wouldn't describe ourselves ultimately as social media for the simple reason that social media is generally driven by what's called a social graph. A social graph effectively is an algorithm which looks at all of your friends and what they're talking about, what they're watching, and then shows you that. TikTok is defined by a content graph. What that means is we are looking at what you're watching and then finding other things that you might be interested to. So there's a bit of a technical difference in the way that the algorithm works, but ultimately they're both user-to-user services.
Thank you. And Instagram?
So Instagram and Facebook are social media companies defined, as Giles has said, as user-to-user services under the OSA for the purposes of that.
So you both define yourself as user-to-user services regulated by Ofcom under the Online Safety Act. That's great. And do you feel that you neatly fit into those categories when it comes to the regulation?
Yeah, broadly speaking, absolutely. Again, there is we don't describe ourselves as social media in the kind of compounds, again because of that content algorithm, but absolutely for kind of practical purposes. And indeed, it's worth saying that the debate on how the Online Safety Act works predates TikTok existing. So TikTok launched after the first Green Paper on OSA. So we've been part of that conversation right the way through our existence, and it feels like that's an appropriate way to regulate millions of pieces of content.
Right, and the same question to Instagram.
Yeah, so we are a social media company, just to draw that distinction. I think, yes, it works well under the OSA. Obviously, it's still being implemented. Not all the duties are enforced yet. And I think you can already see things are evolving. So things like AI, chatbot starts to kind of put a bit of strain on some of those definitions. But broadly speaking, it's a definition that makes sense for us.
That's very helpful. We just want to make sure that we know who you are and what you do before we start asking our questions. Then we're going to kick off with Cam. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if you'd mind if I opened with a couple of very well-known psychological experiments. In 1967, the Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes experiment was run by teacher Jane Elliott. She was a third grade teacher. She pitted friends against each other by explaining that those with blue eyes were superior to those with brown eyes. She gave the blue-eyed students special treatment, and she highlighted the mistakes made by those with brown eyes. And then she stepped back. And within a very short time, those pupils were visiting physical harm upon their own friends. The Stanford prison experiment split a friendship group of older students into prisoners and guards. And in these older students, this experiment yielded similar results. The Milgram experiment demonstrated that even compassionate, conscientious people can be persuaded remarkably easily to inflict serious harm, potentially even death upon others, when an environment enables them to do so. I remember the first time that I saw my daughter, and my mind changed immediately. My primary focus in life was to protect that person. I wondered if either of you have children.
I don't have children, no.
I do, although they're 5 and 2. So.
My daughter's 5 too. Oh, that's excellent. If you believed that another person was influencing your child to harm themselves, would you want to know about it?
Yes, absolutely.
You know who Jules Sweeney was? So Jules lived just a couple of miles away from me until he took his own life. If you found your child the way that Jules's mother found him, would you?
Yes.
Are you aware that TikTok has declined to release Jules's social media history to his parents, and that she's currently taking TikTok to court in the United States?
So if I can start by saying, I completely empathise with the point you're making about the horror of some of the situation that that occurred. I think we've spoken to Jules's mother on a number of occasions about this issue. There is an ongoing court case, so there's a limit to what I can say, as you'd expect, because it's important that those things play out. It is worth saying, though, that when it comes to the question of data, we have talked to her about that and about the sequence of events, which means we have a duty, under legal duties under GDPR, to delete certain data after a certain amount of time. As you'd expect, we have to follow that, and that does impact on some of those issues. Obviously, there's legislation going through at the moment directly related to this, which we actively engage with the Department for Science and Technology, the Home Office and others on as well, to see if you can improve that situation in the long run. But absolutely, I think there isn't anyone who would be opposed to kind of finding a good solution to this that means data is preserved in such circumstances.
Are you saying that data has been deleted?
I don't want to go too much into the court case and exactly what's going to happen, as I'm sure you'd appreciate. We have had that conversation directly, and we'll continue to go through the process of the court case. But I'm saying that there are mechanisms by which data has to be deleted, and in terms of when police investigations start and when they come to us to ask for data, obviously if that happens after a period of time, then data can be deleted.
You mentioned GDPR. So where regulations prevent you from sharing that data, do you think that it's incumbent on this House to pass legislation so that to regulate such bodies as TikTok, so that they do share that information with parents?
Yeah, I think finding the kind of the correct way of approaching these two competing kind of legal issues of the importance, and I think we'd all agree on the importance of data protection and GDPR duties to delete data which isn't being used by companies, alongside where there are cases of harm where police, families, others may need access, making sure that's preserved. I think one of the debates that's happening within Parliament, with government, is exactly what the triggers for that are, so that companies like ours know in which circumstances things may be needed to access in future.
Are you familiar with the red versus blue school wars?
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
So, red versus blue, I think the BBC has described this as what's called a phantom trend, so something which wasn't actually happening but was talked about online. This was something that was made, we were alerted to by a number of police forces. We work directly with police forces and have direct kind of lines of contact with a number of police forces who raised concerns about a very small number of posts on our platform which suggested kind of an attempt to create violence between two schools. It is worth saying that immediately upon being told about this by the police, we acted to remove those small number of accounts. It is also worth saying, and I think this is where the phantom trend issue comes to the fore, that after there was a reporting of a small number of accounts, we saw significant increases of people searching for that content, creating similar content, and indeed, quite rightly, people posting things warning others about it. That actually made the issue much bigger.
On TikTok?
We don't believe so, no. Indeed, we found no evidence at all that we've seen of any kind of coordination of genuine attempts at violence on the platform.
What action did TikTok take?
So we removed, obviously, all the accounts that we'd identified. And again, we're talking a very small number when the issue first came to us. We obviously, as The issue grew because of the reporting, because people were talking about it. We scaled up direct teams. We have direct teams that can work on those kind of escalations. We also took action to, for example, ban a range of search terms which might lead to that kind of content, to reduce the ability for people to see it, and put at the top of those where people were searching for that content, what we call an interstitial, which says, get violence on, get information on violence, misinformation, our community guidelines, etc., to signpost people away from that kind of behaviour and towards more constructive things.
Have you done any digging into the economic cost of the school closures that occurred because of this?
Again, I haven't seen any. It is worth saying that, to be really clear, as far as we are aware, this was, again, as the BBC described it, a phantom trend. There was never actually any intent at violence. That's our understanding of it from direct conversations with police. We took very, very fast action to remove any and all content around that. I think one of the things that there is always a challenge with when it comes to these kind of things is, we saw genuine parents and others posting warnings to people saying, don't be so stupid as to get involved in this. Sometimes you also see stuff which is disingenuously teaching to warn people to try and perpetuate it. So again, we had to take policy choices about where to draw the line. In that instance, we drew a very high line in removing content, but we saw it grow kind of over the period of time.
Hello, I'm Natasha. I'm an MP in Croydon, and the red versus blue trend, it had quite a significant impact actually on some of the local schools. I think one school, they had a lot of children in 1 year not even turn up because they were so afraid of what was going to happen. And I appreciate that this is about content on your platform, and you're very clear that you don't want anyone under the age of 13. You're very clear about what kind of audiences you want. But there was a study in your evidence that you put in. So there was a study by the Oxford Economics saying that 60% of British TikTok users purchased a product or engaged with the community based on the stuff they'd seen on TikTok, which is very, very positive. But I think the point I'm wondering around is what analysis have you done about the impact on negative impact of these sort of things? So yes, on the police having to deal with this sort of thing, but also we saw young people running around Clapham because they'd managed to convene each other via TikTok and via other social media platforms. What is the sort of responsibility that you take for the editorial content on your platforms? Because we've got everything from very high-end news outlets to people trying to, create trouble on our streets. So what is your responsibility as TikTok to take ownership of the and editorialize what people will see on your platform?
Sure. So there's a couple of things there. So forgive me if I break them down briefly. So first of all, it is absolutely true, and we've seen kind of numerous examples, and we can talk about some of them in the rest of the committee, around people taking positive actions in their community or indeed kind of in other ways because of stuff they've seen on the platform. You're fundamentally right that where bad content may appear, there is also that risk. That is why we have very, very clear community guidelines to actively remove that content and indeed to signpost people to good behaviour, support where necessary, a whole range of things. So our primary responsibility is to remove that bad content. The second element, I think, where we have responsibility is to make sure that that bad content gap, the vacuum of that stuff being removed, is filled by good content. So we work with a whole range of creators, publishers and others to make sure there's high quality news, information, support, things on. We did a campaign last year, for example, with Women's Aid, with male creators, popular male creators, calling out misogyny, calling out violence against women, to fill the kind of that void with that kind of stuff. I just want to talk about one specific issue when it comes to the Clapham issue that you talked about, and to be really clear, we spoke again directly to the police forces about that. There was absolutely no evidence that was on our platform at all in any circumstances, and indeed the police corrected their statement saying it was on us because they did not find any content, and as so far we've not seen any content other than bystander footage, i.e. people who were there, which includes news organisations filming it, we've not seen anything which suggested it, coordinated it or anything else. The one final thing I'll say, if I may, very quickly, is what we do see, and we have entire teams within our trust and safety team who are looking for risks off platform, looking at kind of encrypted messenger groups, dark web, those kind of places, to try and find things before they happen. One of the things we do consistently see, and we speak quite a lot to government and others about, is a lot of the coordination. We certainly saw this during the school wars issue. Coordination is usually happening on those kind of encrypted services away from our platform, with then people kind of encouraging everything to post stuff onto platforms like TikTok. So yes, we can knock things down. We do think there's a better way of working within government, within police, with some of those other platforms to make sure that there is greater visibility, greater understanding of where those risks may arise, so that we can move quickly to stand up things before they appear, rather than having to deal with them kind of slightly afterwards, although immediately very quickly.
What I guess the question is, and I suppose there's a question for Meta as well, sorry, I'm not trying to ignore you, thank you so much for being here. I guess the question is, though, who is responsible for content on your platforms? Because ultimately, I appreciate they're user generated, but ultimately, even if it is participation videos of showing that and helping to stoke and encourage others to join in, or to seed fear, or to seed people feeling unsafe, what responsibility do you have as platform providers for that content? Because as we've said about from your own analysis, you have a real world impact on what you do, both good and bad. You can take the good, but you've also got to acknowledge the bad as well.
I'll come to call you in a minute, but I think I'd say two things. First of all, as I say, I think our primary responsibility is to remove things and be looking for things to remove. That's why we set very clear community guidelines. That's why we spent $2 billion last year on trust and safety teams to continuously identify new trends, bad actors, the evolving nature of different harms, to take them down. I think that's our primary responsibility. And indeed, under the Online Safety Act, we work very closely with Ofcom on how we both test those responsibilities and how we're measuring up and what our practices and processes are. I do want to, again, on the Clapham issue, be really, really clear. Anything which is stoking violence, perpetuating violence, endorsing violence is against our community guidelines and comes down. I think where the balance does lie, and it is a challenging balance, I think it's an interesting part of the debate, is, if we have news footage on the platform of something happening, we think it's probably right that should be available, put on the platform. If that is bystander footage which is filmed by someone else, is it fundamentally different if that bystander footage is under kind of a BBC or Sky News label versus a individual creator label and someone individually who's posted it? I think that generally is a challenge for us. We take a high bar. So as I said, on things like the school wars, we actively set a very high bar for what we would and wouldn't accept. But it does, when it's literally people filming something that's happening in the street, become challenging.
What point do you think you're desperately unlucky on TikTok? Because it just seems that whenever there is a kind of a large-scale issue with something happening, Clapham is a separate issue, but when it comes to schools, we've had the red versus blue team, we had in America the Skullbreaker craze. I remember when one of my youngest son was at school a couple of years ago, there was this point where children were strangling each other to the point of passing out, and that was all. This was all put at the door of TikTok. Why is everyone putting it at the door of TikTok? Are you desperately unlucky, or what are you doing to make people think that you're responsible for these viral crazes?
So I think there's three things there that we're saying. So the first is, we are a very large platform with a lot of content on, and while we take a very, very proactive approach to taking things down and set kind of very, very strict community guidelines, in the UK, 99.9% of everything we removed in the last quarter was done proactively, i.e. we found it, not police, media, etc. There are always going to be bad actors who will evolve and attack kind of all platforms. So that's point one. There is a genuine thing about the nature of evolving harms, and that goes to my point about how we engage with some of those services where coordination of that happens. Secondly, and very candidly, in Presidio safeguarding, who can run by former academics at Harvard, looked at this in quite detail on the kind of dangerous challenge trend issue a few years ago. An awful lot of this is very, very small amounts of content that are then perpetuated by people getting concerned about them. And actually, that grows the issue in terms of its salience. That's not the same as there being lots of content on the platform. So some of the challenges you mentioned, to be clear, have never trended on our platform, have never been at a level of kind of significant.
Why am I having this
justice.
conversation with you and not with Rebecca?
What I would say is also candidly, with the newest platform, we know for a fact that people like writing about TikTok, people are interested in TikTok, including the media, and that does drive some of the way that coverage sits. Again, if I go back to something like the Clapham example, the communication originally from the police said Snapchat and TikTok. They sort of just assumed that it was TikTok, and actually when we asked them about it, they're like, well, we haven't found anything, we've just found it on Snapchat. There is a challenge there for us to educate and kind of work with people to kind of make sure that they're kind of understanding of both what isn't on the platform and what we're doing to resolve it, to work together.
How often do you find yourself talking to the police about incidents that are attributed to TikTok?
And we have a dedicated law enforcement team who spend a lot of time talking to them, not just about things which may happen, but also kind of planning for things which aren't there yet, looking at trends, again, looking at things on other platforms and trying to kind of prevent them from coming on.
These kind of viral things, how often would you guys find yourself in conversation with the police about this sort of thing?
I'd be wary of kind of giving a specific number, because I think these things ebb and flow. I'd obviously say that we speak to them about a whole range of things, and some of those are very small, like individual direct harm incidents, and actually those are kind of sometimes the things which are most important. There's kind of a range of ways that we would speak to them.
Rebecca, Instagram's absolutely huge, and it also has a young audience. Why do you think we're having this conversation with Giles and not with you?
So I think there might be a couple of reasons, although I wouldn't want to give the impression that I'm trying to tell you there's nothing harmful ever happens on Instagram, because that wouldn't be a genuine statement to make. Our Instagram is driven, it's a personalised service that we provide. So whereas you get less trends happening, if that makes sense. So what that means is people come to Instagram to follow their friends, their family, things they care about, their favourite football team, their favourite creators, whatever it might be. And what they then see on our platform is very much driven by that individual. So your Instagram feed is going to be very different to mine. And therefore it's driven less by what is trending and viral at the time, and more about what you want to see.
So TikTok is a platform, as far as you observe, curated specifically to create that virality.
I can't speak to TikTok. Giles would have to give you a better idea of how that works, but I think that might be why there are definitely differences in what we see sometimes between the two platforms.
Thank you. Giles, do you have any thoughts on that?
So again, I think you're right that TikTok does drive kind of big popular trends. It's worth saying, just for clarity, that the vast majority of the content that we see trending on the platform is overwhelmingly positive, and we're talking about very, very small incidents. Again, if I think of something like the red versus blue issue, when we were first alerted to it by police, there were fewer than 50 videos on the platform in any way related to it. Again, after reporting of it, that increased by about 19,000% in terms of the searches for it. So people were actively looking for it.
But it wouldn't have happened the same way if it had been on Instagram.
Again, I'd let Instagram kind of answer for exactly how things would appear on their platform. But again, we did see, and we do regularly see these issues across all platforms. I don't think it's just a TikTok issue.
I'm going to go to
just on
Vicky
the
first.
Pains to talk about the
Wait. Everybody, hold on. I want to go to Vicky first, then I'll come back to Damien. Thank you.
Giles, it's
Sorry,
great to
been waiting for
hear
ages.
that it's your primary responsibility to ensure that you remove things and that you have teams looking for risks. And in terms of red versus blue, when did you first identify the problem, and then when did you ensure that it was properly excluded from the platform?
I don't have the timeline directly in front of me. I'm happy to come back. It's worth saying, I think I'm right in saying we initially identified it around the same time the police initially came to us. And then we moved to obviously ban the initial accounts. We then took, as you'd expect, we set up a team to deal with the issue, an escalation team. As media coverage kind of increased the amount of visibility of that issue, we scaled the interventions we take. So as people start to search for it, then we take action to remove those search terms.
As the MP for Lewisham North, this was also a very big issue in my constituency. This was raised with me on the Thursday. Our schools were writing out to parents, and we had police at all of the schools monitoring it. I do not believe that all content was taken down until the following Wednesday or Thursday. So I think it would be really useful to have the actual timelines for when you went and actually barred the red versus blue war stuff on your platform, because this was incredibly terrifying for young people and families in my constituency.
Happy to kind of come back with a timeline. Again, we acted the moment we heard from the police and kind of engaged with them about the type of content.
I mean, you might have acted on the initial post, but you didn't act on all of the additional posts. I think that you've already alluded to that when you've been given evidence.
So we act immediately on anything we find. You know, there are, but again, happy to write to you with a kind of a detailed timeline of exactly what we took in mind.
I think there was definitely the commentary on it was left on your platform for quite some time. So the initial posts were taken down, but the thing that you said creates the hype, people talking about the thing, that stuff was left up for quite some time. I just wanted to pick up on one thing very quickly. You talked about the accounts that posted this. Is the issue here around account verification and making sure that there aren't bad actors basically hijacking your platform to create social unrest for no good reason other than creating mischief?
No, I don't think that's quite right. I think we take a range of measures to try and stop bad actors appearing on the platform and getting onto the platform. Already there's a whole range of things we do. I'm not going to talk about the methods and practices kind of in public for fairly obvious reasons. I think what we do though is kind of spend an awful lot of time within our trust and safety team identifying content, because it can, coming from anyone, and enforcing our rules very vigorously against them. I think that's the most appropriate way to deal with this, to deal with these kind of issues.
Thank you. Damien?
Hold
on, Damien.
There was a question that came up about why does it seem to be so often you in the frame? You were at pains to stress right at the start of this session that you have a different algorithm, that it's not the classic Facebook as was sociograph. You can be somebody who instantly is all over the internet in a way that you can't, even on other social media platforms, and God knows they have problems enough of their own. Isn't that true?
I think the different ways the algorithms may work means that we have different ways of protecting our users and different approaches and different priorities, which is absolutely correct, and you expect that to be right. I think that changes the way we deal with these things. I don't necessarily think it changes the kind of desired outcomes, or indeed what we see. And it is worth saying again that on all of these issues, the coordination of this activity has not happened on our platform, was not happening on our platform, and the endorsement of any form of violence is the thing we take most seriously and remove from the platform incredibly quickly. There is a challenge, I think, when it comes to things like people warning others, kind of what we wouldn't usually call counter speech, about how you deal with that and whether that perpetuates fear or not. I think there's a genuine debate there and interesting views on it. But I think the way we approach it is different rather than kind of what we're seeking as an outcome.
Yeah, indeed. Although, and I'm going to ask Rebecca a similar question in a moment. In the wake of something like Red v Blue, do you do, and have you in this specific case, done an analysis to see if anybody made money out of Red v Blue for the Creators Fund, for example?
So we do look at kind of monetization as one of those escalation things that when we're standing up teams to make sure that no one can monetize off that. Obviously, you wouldn't want to see it. It is worth saying that with our Creator Fund, it works slightly differently to, I think, some other platforms. To be in the Creator Fund, you have to be abiding by the community guidelines anyway, so it becomes a very quick decision.
You are not immune to charity scams, for example, with people who presumably are making money through the Creator Fund. Unmute this video, play it for 30 seconds. These are all ways to make money out of your platform.
So within the Creator Fund, that wouldn't be the case, because again, we have a very narrow and high bar criteria for that, for those exact reasons.
You're saying you do not have charity scams, for example, on your platform? I'm
saying that the monetization through our, what's called a creator reward program, i.e. those individuals who get money because of the content that they post, the way we set up those requirements means they have to be posting a certain amount of videos, etc., but they also have kind of specific rules on being users in good standing. So we try and isolate them. We don't have, as some other platforms do, kind of pre-roll advertising before videos, which allows that revenue share.
Can you just really quickly, can you just talk us through the criteria or the triggers for getting payouts from a video on the Creator Fund? Things like unmute, duration, time, and so on. Just very quickly, what's the summary?
So I haven't got the full list in front of me. I can happily get it for you, but effectively it is you need a certain number of followers and be getting a certain number of videos.
That's to sign up. That wasn't my question. My question was, if you're in the programme, what are the triggers for being paid out on video watches?
So the way it works is basically on the number of watches you have, you will get a certain amount of money. The important thing is...
I guess my question is then, all right, let's move further. What counts as a watch? I do feel like these are leading questions. I realise that.
No.
Not so you can scroll past the video, you can dwell on it for 2 seconds, you could watch it for 5 seconds, you could unmute it, you could watch it for 20 seconds, and these do not all have the same effect on how much money you get, do they?
So we describe a watch. I'd have to double check exactly what the kind of duration length is. I know it's not the full watch, but it is a period of it. Again, to be clear, because of the way we set up the criteria for that rewards program, if that content would be breaching our community guidelines, or if any of your content was breaching community guidelines, you're instantly no longer eligible for that rewards program. So again, that's one of the ways we can drive good behaviour within the rewards program, because the risk of losing your ability to monetize is quite significant.
And Rebecca, finally for me, how do you analyse after there's been one of these crazes or challenge viral things? How do you analyse if money has been made and by whom?
It can be, yes. Sometimes that's true. So we have seen, there was an example recently of accounts on Instagram who were filming women in the street. Some of you might remember that illicit filming and then posting that and trying to monetize that content. So clearly, when we became aware of that, those accounts were removed, and we did look into where, if they had been able to use, I don't remember whether they had, but if we would look to see if anyone, we apply stricter criteria if you're trying to monetize from our platform, and obviously if we find you in breach of any of our rules, your account and your ability to use that is removed.
Thanks, Cam.
Charles, you told my honourable friend the TikTok algorithm protects users, but surely driving virality as it does, it's not popular because it protects users, it's popular because it exposes them. Is that not right?
No, so one of the ways that the variety works, and with our trust safety, and it's worth maybe kind of exploring this, is when any content is uploaded to our platform, it is reviewed by our trust and safety teams against our community guidelines, and will remove things. As posts grow more viral on the platform, as they grow, as more people want to look at them, because of that kind of process that happens, they will then go up to 2 further rounds of moderation. The idea being that things which are most seen on the platform have been through significantly more checks, including human checks, etc., to make sure that they're abiding by our community guidelines. So that growth and the way that the algorithm kind of slowly grows kind of content, and kind of to make sure that the highest quality stuff comes to the top, means that there is that additional ability to check and make sure that the kind of content we want to see succeeding on the platform, whether that's small businesses, individual creators, etc., is the stuff which is getting most traction.
Like the Skull Crusher challenge?
Well, again, as I said previously, these things have not been viral on our platform. That's not to say there's never been content, and I think there's a big difference.
There's another one where children were eating detergent tablets.
Again, the question of virality and how popular these videos are is very different, I think, from some of the way that they've been talked about. I think that's the kind of key difference here. We obviously want to act to take things down regardless if they breach our community guidelines, but we are very adamant that a lot of these challenges that people have talked about have never been viral on our platform.
Can I just round up my initial question, please, Chair? If I can take you both back to 1967, after creating that environment where the children had ultimately ended up attacking each other, that teacher, Jane Elliott, she then stepped back in, explained the experiment and regulated the scenario. Do you think she was right to do so?
I don't know enough about the experiment to know, to be honest, but...
You're not sure that it was right that the teacher, having created that environment, then did her job and protected those children by settling it down?
I just don't know about the experiment enough. I assume so, but I wouldn't.
Rebecca?
Again, I couldn't speak to that experiment, but I think what you're driving at is we have created an environment that has, we have 13 the age limit for Instagram is 13. We have created a different space for everyone 13 to 18, which is teen accounts, where they are defaulted into a much more restricted experience. So I think what you're driving at is, if you create a space for teens, you should have responsibility to engage and make sure that's as safe as possible. Then my answer would be yes.
Regulate that area, yeah. Giles, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
If she had not done so, who else ought to have stepped in to ensure that environment was regulated?
I mean, that's what Ofcom is trying to do now about user-to-user services in the UK who are giving their services, providing them to over 13.
Giles?
Yeah, I think, obviously, as Rebecca says, Ofcom as the regulator is a kind of key element here in terms of kind of the modern context. I also think that we speak a lot to parents and others about these kind of issues and things that people see on our platform. One of the things we try and design our safety tools to do is also to encourage that conversation between parents and teens, because we also know that a lot of parents kind of want to understand what they can be saying to give their teens the best information about being safe online as well. So I think it's a whole society approach ultimately.
Thanks, Giles. Rebecca?
Good, thank you very much. Let's move on to Liz, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to focus on parental controls, and if I can start off by asking you both what controls your platforms have to control how parents can control how their teenagers use the platforms.
I go first.
Yeah, you go first.
Give Giles a break. So as I just mentioned, in 2024 we began rolling out teen accounts that defaults all users between 13 and 18 into a much more restricted experience. It responds to what we hear globally from parents are their main concerns, which is around who can contact my child, what content are they seeing, and then screen time. And I'm happy to go into the list, but to your specific question about parental controls, it has built-in link to the parents and parental supervision, so they can, for example, entirely tailor it to their teen. So amount of time, they get notifications about who's contacting your teen. We will notify you if your teen is looking for something that, like suicide and self-harm, for example, it might be. You can see who's contacting them. You can also reset their algorithm if perhaps your child may have begun looking at something that you don't want them to look at and you think you want to. So there's a full suite of controls there for parents. But like I said, I think in the big debate that everyone is having currently about well-being online, we are very keen to make it as easy as possible for parents. So rather than those features being off and the parents have to go, it's all on by default, and then they have the ability to tailor it.
So on TikTok, there are about 50 different settings for teens to kind of enable them to kind of change the way that the experience works on the platform, and most of those are built into the family pairing tools as well. It's worth saying that we do make some very specific choices about areas where we think are potentially the most harmful, that we don't kind of allow that to be the parental choice. So for example, direct messages, which we do see as a potential kind of serious risk of that kind of peer-to-peer harm, are turned off for under 16s. They're not allowed access at all to direct messages. Then we've also done some interventions on screen time, such as kind of a 1 hour kind of default cap, which is there so that after an hour of scrolling, people get a message saying you should come off. And also 10 p.m. kind of a curfew session, so that again it will tell you and guide people through a meditation to kind of bring them off the platform. I think one of the other interesting things we've done with family pairing is enable parents not just to set the times when the amount of time that a team may be using the platform, but say there are specific times where they should not be allowed to use it at all. So that might be during the school day, turn it off from 9 till 3, for example, and also allow them to set the session time. So you can say, look, you can have 40 minutes of screen time a day, but we don't want you spending more than 10 minutes in an individual period on the app. And again, that allows people to kind of make very tailored decisions for their teens.
Thank you. Giles, unsealed documents from the court case in Massachusetts suggest that TikTok knows adoption of these tools is remarkably low. Can you confirm exactly what percentage of minor accounts on TikTok in the UK are actually linked to a parent through family pairing, or how many parents are engaging with parental controls?
So it's worth saying when it comes to court documents, obviously, to suspect again, I'm not going to be able to go into the discussions there. What I would say is when we speak to parents, we spend a lot of time making sure that parents are aware of the tools that exist on our platform. So, for example, for any user over the age of 35, we send a prompt notification which says, hey, if you have children, there are these family pairing tools available. We also know from speaking to parents directly, and we have...
Did you say under the age of 35?
Sorry, over the age of 35. So people more likely to be parents, basically. We also...
Not a bit high.
Pardon?
35 not a bit high.
Sign of the times.
You could go lower, yes, but I think that'll probably be a wider demographic question than one I'm prepared to answer. The other thing that we do know from speaking to parents directly, though, is that an awful lot of them will not use our family pairing tools because they're using different tools, so handset level tools, app store level tools as well, and so you have to kind of...
Or they don't understand them.
Well, and the other thing that, again, from a conversation we've had directly with parents and data we've seen, they do understand them, they view them as easy to use, but a lot of them prioritise having the conversation directly with their teens over setting particular screen time caps. And again, I think our responsibility in this is to make sure that our parental controls are the best in class, and we've been at the forefront of innovating on things like session times, on things like being able to see block lists, all that kind of stuff. We think that's the right thing to do, and making the best available solutions to people, but ultimately it's going to be for parents to make the choices which are particularly right for them.
But you can't actually give any numbers on how many parents...
I don't have them available to me, I'm afraid.
Okay. Why did your own internal documents admit that these features only exist behind a somewhat hidden series of menus? And why did TikTok choose to hide these safety entry points rather than making them prominent to ensure parents could actually find them?
Well, again, I think when it comes to documents like that, and I don't want to go into the kind of details of court cases, but we have constant conversations about how
this is publicly available.
How we can, conversations about how we can make things more prominent, more used, are exactly the kind of conversations you'd expect us to be having and want us to be having. Again, things like the notification we send to users over the age of 35, things like the work we do directly with both parents and with teens through things like our Youth Advisory Council to understand how they use the app, where they see these tools being best placed, the direct consequences of some of those conversations.
What's the take-up of your parental contract? Do you know what percentage of children under the age of 16, for example, are their parental controls engaged on their account?
I don't have that available to me, and again, I don't know.
Giles, you're here to talk to us about children, TV, and video content, and you don't know a statistic like how many kids have a parental control.
I'm happy to kind of come back to the committee. What I'm saying is that we know for a fact that an awful lot of the people who don't use them are using different tools as well. So it's kind of...
How do you know that for a fact?
Because we've researched that directly with parents.
You should have the figure, shouldn't you?
Parents think
I don't have that specific number.
Can I ask Rebecca the same question? Do you have that figure?
So I know that of teenagers, so we defaulted everyone in, and then in surveys we've carried out, 97% of parents have stayed in that experience, and they report to a similar kind of 94% said it's extremely helpful because, as I say, part of our intention was to default on. Can't tell you the percentage of people, but the survey work we've done with parents whose children were defaulted into that is very positive.
Sorry, let's go back to Liz. I do apologise.
Giles, can these tools be deactivated by the child themselves? No. And are they able to bypass restrictions by, for example, using a web browser?
No, so if their account is linked to their family parent account, they can't deactivate it.
Okay. Can I ask both of you how you proactively consult with parents in the UK to hear their concerns about teenagers using your platforms?
As I alluded to before, we have a number of ways of doing that. We have dedicated teams within our Trust and Safety organisation which will go out and speak directly to parents and directly to users. We also have things like our Youth Advisory Council, which is a global council, which is made up of teens but also engages with their parents to kind of get direct, kind of more detailed feedback. We also speak to a huge number of NGOs and will work directly with them to kind of, whether it's Internet Matters and others, to kind of utilise their expertise, utilise their experts, utilise their understanding of parents and feed that through as well.
I jump back in there, please. In at least one case...
Hold on, let's let Liz finish her line of questioning. Yeah, go on.
I was only going to very similar answer. So we work with NGOs, Parents Own, Internet Matters, others, but we also have a thing called a policy forum where we work with groups around the world, but we ask our users as well. We ask and engage with parents. Before we developed and rolled out teen accounts, we worked a lot directly asking users who are parents on our platforms what their concerns are and how we could best address them.
Are parental controls bad for business?
No, they're better for business because we want our platform to be as positive and engaging for people as possible. That's what brings us users. That's what keeps the advertisers who pay for it happy. It's entirely in line with our business incentives to have that be good. So the more parents feel happy and the better experience children are having, then that's in our interests as well.
What would you say, Giles?
Yeah, I entirely agree with that. And again, when we speak to, ultimately TikTok is intended to be an entertainment platform. We're very clear that you can't be entertained unless you're safe, and that means that feeling safe on the platform is part of enjoying and using it. And so, yeah, entirely agree.
Presumably you want parents to think that you're a responsible platform. Do you think that parents think you're a responsible platform?
I think, again, when we speak to both our users and their parents, I think there's a lot of positivity about these things. I think we are a young platform, there's education work to be done, absolutely.
And what would you say, Rebecca?
There's clearly concerns about young people online and what they might encounter and what they experience. I think that's going to be a conversation that's sadly never done, never finished. The threats changes, the technology changes. So, as I just said, we've had a very positive response to teen accounts and what we've done there, but I don't think that's mitigated entirely people's concerns, and nor should it. I think we all need to be alive to the risks and constantly trying to look to ways to ensure that we're doing our best in that space.
Very popular. I've got supplementaries now from Damien, then Cam, and then Natasha. Damien.
Thank you. Rebecca, you spoke earlier about the proportion of teenagers on Instagram whose parents were linked into their accounts.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the average number of Instagram accounts per Instagram user?
Well, so we want to ensure, we work hard to ensure that the person is an authentic account. So obviously we don't want people to have fake profiles, and because usually that is very directly correlated to harmful content. I don't have a number for whether people have...
Other people estimate it. You have no estimates.
I'm happy to... I just don't happen
to... Are you
to
familiar with... I think these are dated terms these days, but you are familiar, I take it, with the terms Finster and Rinster.
Finster and Grinster. No, maybe I'm not.
That's for fake Instagram account and real Instagram. Are you honestly telling me those are not... I mean, they're old words now. Mm-hmm. You're honestly telling me those are not terms that you're familiar with?
It may be just that I'm not familiar with those terms, but if your question is an average of how many accounts a user might have, I'm happy to go and try and find that number. I don't happen to know that in front of me.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Natasha, thank you.
Just to kind of clarify, are your platforms safe for children aged 13 and above?
We spend over £2 billion a year trying to make sure that is absolutely the case. So yes, we want people to have an entertaining experience. That is in our interest, it's in our users' interests, it's also in advertisers' interests. Yeah.
I don't think we would ever get to that point. We work hard to make it as safe as possible. But as I said, we absolutely recognise that there are evolving risks, existing risks. I don't think it's a piece of work that's ever going to be done, and I think that's the way in which we approach it. So I think a claim that it's safe would give a false sense of confidence to perhaps parents and other people using the platform. We should all be vigilant about risks.
So, at least for Instagram and for Meta, platforms aren't safe for children aged 13 and above, and opposed to TikTok, we're trying to make it safe for children 13 and above.
I think that's absolutely our ambition. As Rebecca says, we know when we kind of engage on bad actor issues that bad actors evolve their mechanisms, and it's incumbent on us to keep up with those changing ways that danger may appear. I think that's not just a question for us as a platform, as I say, a lot of the coordination which happens elsewhere online, I think is a really important part of this, and that's one of the things we've been speaking to people about, to try and make sure that this important part of society is safe in the same way as I think for the wider society. There are lots of risks, and we're all working collectively to make sure that we are.
I think this is slightly different to say, I don't know, walking across the street and perhaps somebody speeding and it's bad, because in other areas of media where we had Sky in earlier today and we had Paramount in, as a parent, and you're making decisions about where your children consume media, you are able to control much, by default, what they see and how they consume that media, whereas yours is more sort of Wild West. Perhaps we can put in some parental controls. So I don't think it's a sort of just an accepted thing that we're trying to make it safe. I think the question should be, how do we make it safe, and just make it safe. Both companies have been involved in this lawsuit in America. I think TikTok sort of settled, and Meta have been found guilty of creating a platform that is intentionally addictive. What are your initial thoughts on that? I appreciate that Meta might be pushing back on the ruling, but TikTok obviously settled. Well, how are you going to make your platforms not intentionally addictive?
We don't agree with that finding, and we're in an ongoing legal process, so I'm afraid I'm very restricted in what I can talk about. I'm happy to talk about what we do on the platform, as I said, to try and keep users between 13 and 18 and everyone as safe as possible, and that's what we're focused on doing. And that if you look at what we have done over the years, a long investment, obviously Facebook in particular is more than 20 years old. It's had rules around content and safety features and parental controls and all this kind of thing that has evolved for a long time. We have 40,000 people working in safety and security. We spend multiple billions of dollars every year. I can never sit here and say it's all fine and everything's perfect. Sadly, this is an adversarial space that changes all the time. But you should I would encourage you to look at what we have done and the evidence of how it's working, but I can't go specifically into that.
The question is that, given everything you have done, and as you acknowledge it's still not safe, why are people still trying to sue you?
I can't talk about the lawsuits.
Not that one, but the other ones, the other people that are coming forward with other evidence. Why, if you're doing all of this and it's supposed to be making an impact, why are people still trying to sue Meta for having addictive platforms?
Can't speak for why people bring forward lawsuits against us.
Let's talk about your staff, though. So in The Observer, there was a report that staff at Meta called Instagram a drug. What do you think that what were they referring to?
Those are leaked documents, mostly from quite some years ago. They don't really reflect the reality of our platforms as they are now. So I can't tell you what they were referring to. What I would just encourage you to do, as I've just been saying, is to look at what we have done and how effective that is on the platform. I think we've made great strides, and as I said, the comments and reflections we get back from parents support that. This is obviously a piece of work that's going to be done.
So why do you think that, so tomorrow in Parliament we're going to be voting on whether to ban social media for under 16s. Why do you think, if everything's going in the right direction, why would we be in a position that we have to consider that vote?
We don't think a ban is the right way forward. We don't think it's going to be effective, and we think there's a very strong chance that it's going to risk promising parents something that can't be delivered. And the same warnings that were given in Australia, I think we can see that there's having quite a bit of difficulty over there for the same reasons everybody said. I understand a lot of it's being driven by people's genuine concerns about children growing up online and what the right space is and what the age-appropriate experiences are. I understand why the conversation is happening, and I think there's better ways, and I'm glad to see that the government is consulting on actually thinking through more like features and functions and where children spend their time and what the evidence of the risks, rather than reaching for a ban, which we don't think is the right approach.
When you say in Australia it can't be delivered, why do you say that?
So some of the challenges around delivering it is around the technical limitations on age assurance. So no one is going to claim that age assurance is a perfect science. It's not. We have a whole range of ways we try and accurately identify how old people are. And we're part of lots of partnerships to try and lead the way on technology that can make that easier. One of the difficulties about age assurance at the moment is that apps are currently asked to do it app by app. The average teen has about 40 apps on their phone. We don't think that's helpful for parents. We think there's a much better App Store level age solution, which would be like one gateway that you would be able to verify someone's age, that would then benefit all of us as apps. Not to say that we would then stop doing what we do, but it would be a missing piece of the jigsaw. Mm-hmm. So it's part of the limitations around age is one of the things that makes a ban like that quite difficult to deliver.
I mean, in the some of the findings for Australia, which has, as you know, had the ban for under 16s is that over half the children who previously had TikTok or YouTube and Instagram accounts are still able to access their accounts on these platforms. Why do you think that it's your account and your accounts that particularly struggle to implement?
I'm not sure it's us. That I think that's universal across all of this applies to all companies that are in scope. I think there's several reasons. We've seen, for example, like marketplaces spring up in Australia for people selling their ID to lend you ID if you're trying to get back online. We've also seen what they call logged out browsing, so they no longer have an account but they search for an Instagram video and then can view it. And one of the things that's most disadvantageous about that is all of the protections I was just talking about. You're now no longer in any of those protections. They're accessing it through a different way without an account.
Are they accessing it?
So if you just don't have an account, you search for a particular creator, you can going in through Google search and watch videos without being in what we call a logged out experience. You're not logged into our service.
Is this a problem with Google?
That's for Google, I'm afraid, but it is one of the ways that you can circumvent the ban that we're seeing spring up in Australia.
Isn't that... Because obviously TikTok's successful, so I guess maybe there was a bit of a slight... I don't know if there is an admission that TikTok has an addictive algorithm, but isn't the behaviour that we're talking about young people trying to get around this, is it kind of demonstrating addiction, is it not? Is it not kind of proving the point that your services aren't particularly good for children's well-being if they're trying to get around it?
What we've seen is a lot of teenagers, and I think you're probably aware that a lot of younger people are also bringing action against the ban in Australia because it has removed them, particularly more marginalised teens. They had LGBT plus communities, they were from diasporas of different people from living in Australia contacting each other. I think a lot of it is driven by the fact they feel like they've lost their communities, they've lost their way, and because it's being implemented unevenly, unfortunately, and despite best efforts to comply, of course, with that, some of their friends are still on it and some of them aren't. And I think it's a reflection more that these platforms play an important role in young people's lives and young people's identities, and that if you just take it away, they're going to try and find a way back. I don't think we can automatically assume...
Is that the fault of the platforms? Is that the fault of the government, or is that the fault of parents?
Which bit is the
fact that the government have banned social media for under 16s, and yet you say, and statistics say that a big chunk of them are still accessing it in Australia. Whose fault is that? Parents, government, platforms?
These are the risks
just a one-word answer would be sufficient. We don't need, we've all got other things to do this afternoon.
These risks were flagged before and were not, as we've seen, 40 plus UK safety organisations wrote to the government flagging similar issues for why the UK shouldn't proceed with a ban. I think it's the Australian authorities will have to speak for why they moved ahead.
What's your view? Government, parents, platforms, who's at fault?
I think it's unwise to pass law that ignores the technical limitations of what's deliverable for parents.
You're saying government?
I think it's I can't speak for how the Australians came to that decision, but that's my view.
Government's at fault. Okay, Annalise.
So as MPs, we all go into schools and colleges a lot, and this is a live topic that's up for discussion, and so quite often I'll be asked what I think about the ban on social media platforms for under 16s, and I ask those young people the question, and it's obviously anecdotal, it's my experience, but the majority of those young people do think that there should be more protections, and there is an issue with accessing social media. And I know that you said that yours was an entertainment platform, but I think they would include TikTok within that. Why do you think that the young people themselves are saying that, and saying that they feel like they've had bad experiences on there, and more and more their life is becoming something that online is a big part of it? Why would they be saying that themselves?
Well, if I may, on the ban specifically, because I think there's probably a slight difference in approach here. So we ultimately think the debate about whether there should be a 16-year-old level versus a 13-year-old level is one ultimately for policymakers, I think. As the government consultation, I think, fully recognises, there's a huge amount of complex and competing evidence in the end. There are direct competing interests. We definitely see that there are huge numbers of teens who derive real value, real community, whether that's LGBT kids, kids who are interested in science, who are then being exposed to kind of a huge range of kind of really exciting creators in that space, arts, music, culture. There is real value there, but there are absolutely then, trade-offs and challenges there. So we ultimately do think it is a question for policymakers to look at the whole of the evidence base and make policy-based decisions.
Of course, there's young people that go on and create amazing content, and we should celebrate and champion those skills and the opportunities that might give them. But they're also saying that there's been things where they feel like they've had bad experience online. So what is your starting point? Because you're kind of talking like it's a bed of roses, and when you're talking about policymakers, it's their lives.
So again, I think where we see our role and responsibility in this, again, I think the ultimate choice about where you set the age is for policymakers to determine, not, I don't think, for platforms. What we spend our time doing and focus on is speaking to those teens about that trade-off that they see and the benefits they see in some of the areas where they want us to do a bit more, and then seeking to consistently be at the forefront of innovation in that space. So, for example, one of the things we have heard from teens is that, putting the phone down can be hard at the end of the day, which is why we introduced a 10 p.m. curfew, which kind of helps guide people off the platform and enables them to kind of then go.
Feel any sense of responsibility that these young people feel that they have a bad experience on your platform?
Well, again, I want to be clear, the vast majority of the people we speak to and teens we speak to have an overwhelmingly good experience. But yeah, absolutely, and that's why we're constantly innovating in those kind of spaces, whether it's the hour-long cap, whether it's the 10 p.m. curfew. We think one of the benefits of the way the government's approaching this and the consultation is to look at some of that best practice and make decisions. There are other areas, and I've alluded to them before, where we have actively made choices that we just don't think these things can be safe for teens. So, for example, direct messages, again, we have turned off for under 16s specifically because we do see the direct harm vectors there.
But is there ever if you're talking about the things you've actively taken off, so direct messaging, what about infinite scrolling? Can you just stop doing that? Would that be helpful?
So again, I think it depends how there's a lot of complexity, and I think the consultation talks about this, about how you define some of those terms. Because again, we have, after 30 minutes, a prompt which will say, hey, just stop watching. I think that's different.
It's a very long time to be sat.
True, but that's why we give people the ability to kind of set individual session times as well, because people will make individual choices. I think what we see is the value of the way that our platform works is that discovery and window into things that you may be interested in. So, we will regularly see and speak to teens who are like, look, I'm vaguely interested in science and maths, and actually because of that I've stumbled across a creator like Big Manny who does kind of direct teaching of science content, does science experiments in a very accessible way to teens, and are really engaged in that. And what we then see, and you I think alluded to it previously, is that people will then take action off the platform as well. So they'll go, I've had a bit of exposure to this kind of short form content about education, I'm now going to go and find a course, find a way to kind of engage with that longer term as well. So I think there's a benefit of that discovery mechanism.
That's the point, isn't it? And I think this is about content, young people's content, and where they find it and where they're migrating to consume it. And we all can accept there are benefits to that, and the groups can form. But we're talking about how we keep them safe and prevent the harms, and sort of the retrospective, like designing out eventually. And I couldn't really get to the point of with your parental controls. Are they default, or do the parents have to opt into them?
Well, so you have to link an account, obviously, because we don't necessarily know who someone's parent is by just dint of being on the platform.
Could that not be as part? I mean, who am I to tell you how to do anything in your business? But it's surely part of the negotiation with a teenager to have an account could be you need to have this linked to a parent. Whether they be 35 might be a bit too high, but surely there are things you can do to ensure that it isn't, basically like sticking seatbelts in your car after you've bought it. It's actually designing it in the first place. Why would you not do that just by default?
Yeah, and again, this is, I think, one of the benefits of the consultation, because it's looking at some of these things in the round. There are, with the idea of default requirement for a parental control, There are, as alluded to, plenty of parents who go, actually, that's not how I want to parent my child and want to be able to make that choice. There are also, edge cases. If you're, a young LGBT kid from a devoutly religious family, there may be challenges with that as well. So, we do have to think about these things in kind of the quantum. I think that's what the consultation is driving at. And I think our responsibility within that consultation is to share some of that best practice we see and kind of ultimately allow policymakers to make choices about where you draw those lines, because there's always going to be, benefits and downsides to kind of any choice in this space.
You're outsourcing that to us to decide where we're going to draw that line for you. Will you be able to then produce the data that we need to make those decisions in the best possible?
I think ultimately, I think it's quite right that government and Parliament has kind of decision-making power over the way platforms work. That's what the Online Safety Act was there to create on the content side when it comes to some of these issues. I think that's why we're genuinely open to the conversation and for policymakers to make that choices. Absolutely, we'll engage with that, and we've obviously speak directly to Ofcom and have done since we first existed about some of that data and allow them to kind of provide the best possible evidence.
Right, we need to make a bit of progress now because otherwise we're never going to get out of this room. Thank you, everybody. I need to move on now. I would like to conclude today by 1:15 at the latest. So if we can move on, and let's go to Vicky, please.
So it's quite timely, the discussion in terms of social media and the challenges with being able to ensure that young people under 16 are banned from it, and it just kind of really links into what you're doing in terms of under 13s to make sure that they're not on social media, as both your platform says they shouldn't be, and how many do you think are getting through who shouldn't be getting through? Either of you.
So I can start by saying, obviously, as we talked about, yes, under 13s are not allowed on the platform. That is not the experience. It is not designed as an experience for under 13s. And I think we're still among the only platforms that publish transparently every quarter how many under 13 accounts we remove. We spend a lot of time thinking about new ways to directly identify.
Do you remove?
I've got it somewhere. I think I'm right in saying, bear with me. I'll find it for you in 2 minutes.
And have the numbers been increasing in terms of removals?
So forgive me. So globally, we removed in the last quarter 13.7 million attempts by under 13s to get access to our platform. That's at 7.8% of all the removals for all kinds of reasons that we do on the platform. I couldn't give you a definitive answer on whether that's gone slightly up or down. I think it's broadly remained static off the top of my head in terms of the number, but obviously
that number as a percentage of the number of users.
I don't think I'd be able to work that out on the fly, but I mean we can certainly look.
You can send that to me.
Yeah, broadly speaking, certainly from the UK side, it could as well. Yeah.
I was just happy out here. Internet Matters says that 32% of children aged 9 to 12 use TikTok. Is that a number that you recognise?
I don't think it's a number I'd recognise. And again, our view on this is we are transparently removing every under 13 account that we find. We don't want any on the platform.
Well, so if you had to, sorry, Vicky, I do apologise for interrupting you. I'm just trying to get a handle on this number. Internet Matters say 32% of children aged 9 to 12 use TikTok. What would you put that percentage as?
Again, because we are seeking to remove every single account we find, there's not accounts that we know of who are under 13 that are on the platform, because when we find them, we remove
You say
them.
there are no accounts under 13?
I wouldn't say that. I'm saying that when we find them, we remove them.
You get rid of them, but there can't be that many.
I wouldn't want to hazard a guess. Again, we are constantly looking at ways through age assurance and other mechanisms to improve those numbers. It's also worth saying that I think some of that data gets a little bit messy because we know, for example, of under 13s who will engage with their parents and watch TikTok on their parents' account with their parent there, which is a slightly different thing, but may turn up in external data as use the platform as well.
Okay, interesting. Let's go back.
What are you doing to make sure that under 13s aren't using it?
So we have a range of mechanisms. I won't go into the detail of them for fairly obvious reasons that we don't want people to try and get around them, if you'll forgive me. But every account which goes onto the platform, we will check against a range of mechanisms to be able to identify. And then as people engage in content, look at content, if they post, that all those things will kind of factor into making that assessment. It is also worth saying that we start from a basis of, before we're sure, we'll put people into an age-appropriate experience anyway, regardless of known age.
So I understand why you say about not necessarily saying the range of mechanisms for people to get around it, but would you give that in private to share with the committee? Is that something we're allowed to ask for?
I think there's certainly some of it we could do. It's a very long list of things we do, and some of those will be kind of IP technology, but I'm happy to go away and ask on what we can provide.
Fantastic. And Rebecca?
Yeah, so probably this all comes down to age assurance. I think I've said it already, no matter what way forward any of us think is the best way on online safety, if we can't better improve the accuracy of finding out how old people are, it's difficult to make it work. We have done a few things, and I think one of the things we think about with age assurance is there's no one foolproof way, so you need a sort of toolkit. So we are using quite a lot of AI detection, so it will look at an account, it will be able to observe things about what's happening. So if someone's put in an age saying they're an adult, it's getting quite good, not fully there yet at going, well actually no, all of their friends, there seems to be a birthday there that doesn't look right, gives us signal. We do a couple of things with Yoti as well about facial estimation. So if we think if we have clear signal you're under 13, obviously that account is found and removed immediately. If there's a kind of bit of uncertainty, you can do facial estimation through Yoti, so you have a kind of video selfie and their technology can say, yes, we think that person is or not. They also do document verification, so asking for formal ID for people. We take a proportionate approach to that because there's some sort of data questions about us having, this is why we do it through a third party, but also the Electoral Commission estimates 3 million people in the UK don't have any formal verification. And the last one, which probably I think the one that's most exciting, is we're a founder of a new non-profit that is called the Open Age Initiative. And what that's trying to do, and it goes a little bit to the App Store comment I made earlier, is it's looking at ways that you might be able to verify your age officially on your device, and that gives you a way of then, no matter what you do from that point, what apps you're downloading and so on, because that's got to be easier. We hear loud and clear from parents as they move around dozens of apps and we all work in different ways that it's very complicated. So I think that's got quite a lot of promise to be part of how we're trying to not only accurately identify people who are legitimately using our platform, but obviously trying to keep 13-year-olds off it.
We need to keep answers nice and short and pithy now because we haven't got much time, and otherwise we'll be here all day. Let's move to Natasha now, please. Question 8.
I'm going to go back to the social media conversations. So we don't really, because we've already talked about this a bit. So there is, again, the other side of this coin is around the benefits of social media and the benefits of content on social media. So you talked about educational things. I think we're thinking really around things like PSB, so public service broadcasters, given that it's content that we've all paid for as the public. How do we, what kind of things would you consider, or have you considered, around prioritising that content over other content? Is that something that your platforms would consider doing?
I'm happy to start. So I think, if we think about, particularly someone like the BBC, I think we see ourselves, as described before, as a discovery platform. We're doing something fundamentally quite different, I think, from what the PSBs are generally doing in their traditional content in terms of it being vertical video, kind of short form content. What we see incredible value with is the partnership that we have with the likes of the BBC to do basically two things. First of all, act as a signpost and a window for the things that they're doing. So, for example, we developed a tool called Spotlight. Spotlight is a way of, when there are big water cooler moments on BBC, so for example, we launched this with Celebrity Traitors. We know that a lot of people on the platform will make content, be really excited about Celebrity Traitors. We've enabled the BBC to then be able to go and tag that content, which will then provide a direct link to the iPlayer, to watch the show. We see that hitting millions and millions of video views and driving, I think the data suggests that over 50% of the people then going to that, using that to go to the iPlayer are under 25.
Does the BBC more money to use, or
no? So these are tools that we developed for them. And I think Fiona Campbell, who's the Commissioner for Youth Audiences, said that it's the future of television, right? Is that relationship? I think the other thing which is really important to talk about is that we also see ourselves as a pipeline for the talent that comes to some of the some of these organisations, things which traditionally would have been very excluded from an awful lot of people. So if I think of someone like Sheeny, who's one of the new Blue Peter presenters, she started on TikTok, she grew her account on TikTok, she learnt the skills of presenting on the platform, and because of her kind of profile on the platform was then able to be spotted, talent scouted and move through. And I think we see a number of examples of that. There's another called Henry Rowley, who is a comedian. We actually took him to Edinburgh Festival, so he was a big presence on the platform, but had never done comedy in public. So we took him and a number of other creators to the Edinburgh Festival. They did their first ever stand-up shows, and because of that he's directly translated. He's now in the, I think, Paramount's Robin Hood. So we see also part of responsibility is that pipeline as well.
But I wonder, there's a lot of talk, especially around children's content.
Yeah.
So when we talk about children, we're talking about 13-year-olds for your platform, especially when it comes to things like YouTube. We're having a framework of what we consider high quality content. A lot of the things we've picked up in this inquiry is very short, snappy things that are not helping our children's brains develop very well. Is there any scope within both of your platforms or your own community guidelines or the frameworks that you can put in place to sort of promote, whether it be a PSB or a user themselves, creating content that is of high quality, i.e. good for well-being, good for development, good for education? Is there a way of promoting that above everything else? Or would you consider doing that?
Yeah, sure. So that is what our recommender system is designed to do. It's designed to reward high quality original content from authentic sources. As I've said at the very beginning, it's also a personalized experience. So once we've found and removed all the content that is harmful and violates our rules, the whole system is designed to do exactly what you want. And we're really pleased that most of the UK, in fact all of the UK PSBs, have enormous presence on Instagram and Facebook, obviously, which we provide for free and which drives huge traffic and engagement to their content. So that our system is designed that way already.
Yeah, I'd say two things very quickly. So first of all, again, we spend a lot of time speaking to traditional kind of content makers about the tools which we can create to help them get that shop window. So things like Spotlight are part of that discussion. I think that's real value for us. I think the other thing is the reason users come to TikTok is because it is a user-to-user service, because of user-generated content, and there are often things which kind of boil up through that, which may not be the kind of things which would be assumed by traditional commissioners to get through. So if I think, for example, of classical music has exploded on TikTok over the last couple of years, and we saw that trend happening, and because of that we were able to go out to the South Bank University and we launched a program called Crescendo, which is there to help 10 young female classical musicians kind of begin and kind of solidify their careers in the classical music industry. I would worry on just due to kind of the traditional content, you lose some of that user-generated value.
Broadened that out to mean content creators other content creators that were making high quality content.
Yes.
So you were talking about your sorry what the comedian is saying, but if you've got content creators on your platform that you deem to be making high quality content, as Instagram does, are you in the future, are you promoting them above other stuff that perhaps isn't as high quality or isn't helping our children's well-being and development?
I think, again, two things. So first of all, the Creator Rewards Programme is entirely designed to kind of support those creators to produce more, continue to produce. Actually, because of the meritocracy element of the platform, that stuff is what's rising to the top anyway. I think there are certain elements where we will kind of support directly, where it's the sports verticals, particularly around big seminal issues. So for example, the World Cup coming up, how can we support those creators to kind of know what's going on, know what the trends are, and then kind of create content which is going to succeed? I think that's where we see the value of kind of our interventions and support being.
Thank you very much. Annalise, did you have anything to pick up on the PSBs?
I guess just how do you ensure that public service broadcasting, which as Natasha said, or like that's taxpayers' money, is in this like wild west of the algorithm, is promoted more than this AI slop of fruit people, or worse than that, inappropriate or like dangerous or content that could be seen as dangerous or not good. I don't feel like you went into what I suppose essentially it's like what is the starting point here, because it sounds like it sounds like it happens and then you move backwards rather than have the starting point as something that is, you know, high quality and you move forward from there, really.
I was saying from a TikTok point of view, I wouldn't quite agree with that characterisation. I think, you know, when we're speaking to those kind of traditional broadcasters, of which the PSBs would be part of, we see it as kind of our own helping, working with them to kind of identify what tools are available and kind of build out new tools, kind of direct our costs. So things like Spotlight being a great way of doing that. We see kind of significant success, and I think the BBC have talked about how important that's been in driving an audience which has moved away from the PSBs back towards those kind of, those seminal shows. I think that, and they are succeeding on their merits. I think the BBC has over 45 different accounts on TikTok, serving a whole range of processes, and they will regularly be at the kind of the top of searches for a whole range of content, and regularly and prominently within people's feeds organically. Obviously, when it comes to certain kind of high-risk events, you know, Iran, etc., we will do work to make sure that if people are searching for news on the platform, they are directly getting kind of as those top results, those high quality, you know, fact-checked broadcasters. But I think in the general sense of kind of the entertainment sector, they see the value as well in being alongside those genuine user-to-users who also get prominence, not least because they are the you know, the presenters, broadcasters, creators of the future, and they want them to succeed, be able to kind of engage with them as well.
And what about giving that as much prominence as, like, what about the, how is that sort of defined against misinformation that could be, you know, as soon as the public service broadcasting has gone away, the next thing that comes up could be something, a narrative presented as fact, but is false.
So I think we're coming back to the safety argument. I think it's worth saying, obviously, we don't allow misinformation on the platform. We continue to use fact checkers directly who will kind of fact check kind of content on the platform. As I say, during those kind of high profile events, the things where we know people will be searching for correct information, we'll also be making sure that, you know, they are seeing the kind of traditional, most trusted news broadcasters kind of highly prominent on searches and in feeds as well.
So who determines what's misinformation on your platform?
So we have a number of ways that there are some things we know are misinformation. We have a misinformation bank of things that we know not to be true, which moderators can directly engage against. Where we see new claims, as I say, we work with fact checkers around the world. In the UK, it's Reuters. Our moderators can then send something to Reuters, who can make 3 decisions. Basically, this is true and should be allowed, this is untrue and should be removed from the platform, or, and there are plenty of cases where, you know, it isn't entirely clear, we can make choices to remove that from the recommender feed. So effectively it's not going to be pushed to people, but still exists on the basis of kind of free speech until those claims are verified or not.
What about something like, I don't know, crazy AI videos of something that didn't happen, and that's not that necessarily a news report or anything, but who is checking that? So
again, 2 things on AI. All AI on the platform has to be labelled regardless, but if it's misinformation, it doesn't matter whether it's AI or not, it will be removed from the platform, it will be fact checked, it will be taken down.
Can I just ask very quickly about prominence for news on social media? Can I just quickly check with you both whether you've had any conversations with Ofcom about that? Starting with you.
As we say, our algorithm is designed to deliver personal experience. So if you are someone who wants to follow lots of news platforms, and we have hundreds, it would be prominent in your newsfeed. We have not had conversations about a more blanket approach to prominence for newsfeed.
And when it comes to sort of follow the news content that's suggested as over and above what people have kind of clicked to follow, is there any prominence for trusted sort of PSB?
Yes. So PSBs would be verified accounts. They come with a blue tick, very clearly what you're looking at. And as your colleagues have just been alluding to, where it's something false, misleading, poor quality, it's either removed from the platform or is downranked so that there's no engagement on it. So that's why these PSBs, I'm really pleased they're using our tools so successfully.
And same question.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of having any kind of direct conversations with Ofcom on that, although I'll check with colleagues. It's worth saying that when we talk about news and some of the Ofcom data, it's worth understanding kind of what we mean by news. So actually I think an awful lot of the news content that people are looking for on TikTok, and this is from Ofcom's data, is actually, you know, celebrity sports content, and they're defining it as opposed to kind of political news, for example. So there's a slight disparity in some of those issues. As I say, The PSBs are highly prominent on the platform. I think the BBC account is BBC News account's about 15 million followers currently, and they have a number of other accounts which all service news as well. Again, they are verified, but also when we're seeing those kind of high risk events, they're going to be actively kind of ensured that people see them first.
When it comes to the verified content, though, I mean, so Rebecca, you just said to me, BBC's verified, so we'll have prominence. But is it right that influencers like Jake Paul or the streamer like Adin Roth, who's previously been banned from platforms for anti-Semitism, is given the same verified status as trusted news providers? So is that true? I mean, a verified status is a verified status, and that could, that doesn't differentiate between super trusted PSB news providers.
They can serve slightly different purposes. So verification on authoritative, formal, recognised institutions and organisations, that's one thing. And then you can be, often individual creators want to use it so that it helps reduce impersonation of their accounts. Obviously, if you're banned from our account or you've had previous content violations, you would not be able to use any of those tools or our monetization tools.
But in terms of the sort of algorithmic prominence, there would be a difference between those different kind of verified accounts.
So, as I said, the algorithm is designed to find and remove harmful content, to amplify best quality original content to people, and after that it's kind of driven by what you in particular want to see. So yes, in the sense that if you are an unverified account promoting loads of clickbait, spammy, terrible content, that will be significantly downranked, if not removed, if it violates our content. Whereas we are incentivizing the best possible creators and content to reach the top of that news.
Just to be clear, there would be no difference in terms of the algorithmic push between something like BBC News and someone like Adin Roth.
It's tailored to each individual person. So at a broad level, verified, authentic accounts that are meeting our rules will be higher up, rather than ones that aren't, but what you might see as an individual will be tailored to you specifically.
Finally, Jeff.
Thanks. So Giles, TikTok have talked about helping teenagers engage with educational and informative content. Can you make an estimate of what proportion of the content on TikTok you could describe as that?
So I think it's hard to kind of define that in kind of the full panoply of the millions and millions and millions of videos. For education can mean a range of things to a range of people, so I think there's a genuine challenge there. What I can share, and this is data we're going to publish in a couple of months' time, so it's a slightly sneak peek for the committee, but we're doing some work with Public First, which suggests that about 18 million hours worth of educational content is being watched on the platform in the UK each year. So so significant amounts of what is being watched is there. We also have a direct STEM feed, so that is science, technology, education. And of that, we know that of under 18s, about a third of them use that once a week, so looking at that dedicated feed of that educational content as well.
And that do you say 18 million now?
I think it's 18.1 million hours, yes.
How can you quality assure that educational content? If the parents look at it, how do they know it's decent content?
So again, with the STEM feeds, we have, creators can seek to opt into that, but all of that content is then checked to make sure it's of kind of high quality. Again, I think when we get into education, kind of the wider definition, again, from survey work we've done, people have, learning how to tie a tie might be education versus, learning how to cook a recipe versus, maths, etc. So I think it's a little bit harder to find kind of a pure metric of fact-checking quality against that as well.
One last question. You talked earlier on about pointing users to iPlayer. What can TikTok do to talk? There's the BBC initiative, the other side of the story. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah, a little bit, yes.
So what can TikTok do to promote that kind of initiative that helps young audiences develop critical thinking, identify misinformation, that kind of thing?
So there's a couple of things we do and can do. So the first is we also work a lot with both speaking to our users and then the BBC and others about kind of how news is evolving and how young people might want to engage with news. One of the really interesting things that may be worth noting is that we're increasingly seeing younger audiences say, well, we want our news served to us in a way which is more kind of benevolent, is the word used, so kind of a little bit more compassionate, a little bit less straight facts because of the way they've engaged kind of with society more generally. And actually that can help shape the way that broadcasts like the BBC choose to kind of present things to that new audience they're trying to reach. I think some of the things like the other side of the story are part of an indication of that responding to audience demands. That's happened over the years, right? Going back to 1960s, BBC broadcast very different from what we'd see today. So that's point one. I think point two, as I say, in those kind of high-profile events, making sure that there's clearly, when people are searching, they're finding that content first. I think it's important. And the final thing is we will do a whole load of work directly with BBC and others on media training and partnerships. So if I think of, it's not PSB or broadcasters, but with the elections going on at the moment, we have what's called our election hub. So on any piece of content which has hashtag election or a whole range of other hashtags, there'll be a signpost to get the facts about the election. That will take you to a site which has been written with the Electoral Commission, and not to portray confidences too much, they're currently in the process of making them. Will then have videos directly from the the Electoral Commission on it as well, so that people can get facts. And again, in those circumstances, we've often taken information from BBC Fact Check about how to kind of get media literacy and put those on those pages as well, so they're directly being driven to that kind of content in those instances.
Okay, we need to finish.
Yeah, thank you. You've been very patient with us today. Thank you for giving us so much of your time, and that concludes today's session. Order.